The air in the Arcane Academy's summoning hall was thick with the scent of ozone and failure, Elias's personal brand of perfume. He stood at the center of the chalk-etched summoning circle, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chamber's cool stone walls. Around him, a semicircle of students watched with expressions ranging from boredom to barely concealed mockery. Professor Alistair, a gaunt man with spectacles perched on his hawk-like nose, tapped his foot impatiently. Elias Thornwood, the professor intoned, his voice echoing in the vaulted space. This is your third attempt this semester. The Academy's patience is not infinite. Proceed. Elias swallowed hard, his throat dry. He could feel the weight of every gaze. Kale's sneer from the front row was like a physical blow. Kale, with his perfect golden hair and effortless talent, had made Elias's life a living hell since their first year. Now, as a senior, Kale led the top-rating team and seemed to take special pleasure in Elias's struggles. Focus, Elias whispered to himself, closing his eyes. He extended his hands, palms upward, and began channeling mana. The familiar warmth spread from his core, a fragile trickle compared to the torrents his peers could muster. He visualized the basic summoning runes, the ones every first-year mastered, a simple spirit wisp, a harmless light entity used for illumination. It was supposed to be easy, but for Elias, nothing was easy. He poured his will into the circle, feeling the mana coalesce. For a moment, hope flickered, a faint glow appeared above his palms. Then, as always, it sputtered. Instead of a wisp, a pathetic wisp of gray smoke curled upward, dissipating before it reached the ceiling. A few snickers broke the silence. Smoke again, Kale said loudly, not bothering to whisper. Maybe he's training to be a chimney sweep, not a summoner. Laughter rippled through the hall. Elias's cheeks burned. He kept his eyes down, staring at the smoke as it vanished into nothingness. 3 years at the Arcane Academy, and this was all he could produce, a puff of failure. He remembered his first day, full of dreams of summoning great beasts and legendary heroes. Now, he'd be lucky to graduate without being expelled. Professor Alistair sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. Elias, come here. Elias trudged forward, his boots scuffing against the polished marble floor. The professor's office was adjacent to the hall, a cluttered space filled with dusty tomes and strange artifacts. Alistair gestured for him to sit in a worn leather chair. I've reviewed your records, the professor began, not meeting Elias's eyes as he shuffled papers. Consistently bottom of your class in mana output. Failed every practical summoning exam. Your theoretical grades are passable, but this academy trains summoners for the real world, for dungeon delves, monster defense, interdimensional exploration. What you produce wouldn't scare a kitten. Elias's hands clenched in his lap. I've been practicing, sir. Every night. Practice without results is futility, Alistair said bluntly. The board has decided. You have one final opportunity, a mandatory dungeon delve into the Forgotten Crypt. It's a low-level training ground, but if you can retrieve a core fragment, any fragment, from within, you may avoid expulsion. Fail, and your enrollment is terminated. Elias's heart sank. The Forgotten Crypt was a beginner's dungeon, yes, but even that required basic summoning skills for defense. He'd heard stories of students getting lost in its twisting corridors, falling prey to weak goblins or slimes because they couldn't summon a simple shield. For him, it might as well be a death sentence. When? He asked, his voice barely audible. Tomorrow at dawn. You'll go alone, no team to carry you. This is your test, Elias. Succeed, and you earn another semester. Fail. Alistair trailed off, but the meaning was clear. Elias left the office in a daze. The academy corridors blurred around him, the laughter of other students a distant buzz. He retreated to his dorm room, a cramped space he shared with 2 others who were rarely there. Sitting on his narrow bed, he stared at his hands, the hands that could only make smoke. Why? He whispered to the empty room. He'd done everything right, studied the runes, meditated to expand his mana pool, even tried obscure techniques from forbidden texts. Nothing worked. It was as if his soul was defective, incapable of bridging the gap between worlds to pull forth an entity. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Visions of dark crypts and lurking monsters haunted his dreams. When dawn's first light crept through the window, Elias dressed in simple adventurer's gear, a leather tunic, sturdy pants, and a worn backpack with a few supplies, a water skin, some dried rations, and a basic mana crystal for emergencies. He didn't own a weapon. Summoners were supposed to rely on their creations. The Forgotten Crypt lay on the outskirts of the academy grounds, a moss-covered entrance carved into a hillside. A small group of students had gathered, drawn by the spectacle of Elias's last stand. Kale was there, leaning against a tree with his arms crossed. "Look who's trying to be a hero," Kale called out as Elias approached. "Need a light? Oh wait, you can only make smoke." His friends laughed. Elias ignored them, focusing on the crypt's yawning mouth. The air here was colder, carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. Professor Alistair stood at the entrance, holding a glowing lantern. "Remember, Elias, retrieve a core fragment. They're scattered in the deeper chambers. You have until sunset. Good luck." The professor's tone held no real hope. Elias nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped into the darkness. The interior of the Forgotten Crypt was exactly as described. A maze of narrow stone corridors, lit faintly by bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the drip of water and the scuttle of unseen insects. Elias moved cautiously, his mana senses stretched thin. He'd been here once before, on a guided tour, but alone, every shadow seemed threatening. For hours, he wandered, finding nothing but empty rooms and dead ends. His anxiety grew with each passing minute. What if there were no fragments left? What if he couldn't even find one? Then, he heard it, a low growl from around a corner. Peeking carefully, he saw a goblin, small and green-skinned, gnawing on a bone. It was a weak in-rank monster, but to Elias, it might as well have been a dragon. He froze, his mind racing. He tried to summon something, anything. A spark of mana flickered at his fingertips, producing a tiny wisp of smoke that drifted toward the goblin. The creature sniffed the air, then turned its beady eyes toward Elias. With a screech, it charged. Panic seized Elias. He turned and ran, his heart hammering against his ribs. The goblin gave chase, its claws scraping against stone. Elias sprinted blindly, taking turns at random, desperation overriding caution. The corridors twisted and turned, descending deeper into the crypt. He could hear the goblin gaining, its guttural cries echoing. In his frantic flight, Elias didn't see the uneven flagstone. His foot caught, and he tumbled forward, crashing hard onto the ground. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs. He rolled, expecting the goblin to pounce, but the sound had stopped. Groaning, Elias pushed himself up. He was in a chamber he hadn't seen before, smaller and circular, with walls covered in strange, glowing runes that pulsed with a soft blue light. In the center of the room, on a pedestal of black stone, rested an orb about the size of his head. It glowed with an inner light, shifting colors from deep violet to gold. "What?" Elias whispered, approaching cautiously. The orb seemed inert, but as he drew nearer, it hummed with energy. This wasn't a core fragment. It was a full dungeon core, something that should have been harvested long ago. Why was it here hidden away? He reached out, curiosity overriding fear. His fingers brushed the smooth surface. Instantly, the orb flared with blinding light. Elias stumbled back, but it was too late. The light enveloped him, searing into his mind. Visions flashed, slot machines spinning, gacha balls dropping, Rarity tiers labeled N, R, SR, SSR. A voice, synthetic and dripping with sarcasm, echoed in his skull. Asterisk scanning. Host detected. Mana signature, pathetic. Willpower, questionable. Suitability, barely adequate. Welcome, loser. Ready to roll for your life. Asterisk. Elias gasped, clutching his head. The voice wasn't just in his ears, it felt embedded in his thoughts. "What are you?" he managed to croak. Asterisk. "I am Dungeon Core Model GX, 777, but you can call me your new best friend, or your doom, depending on how lucky you are. You've bonded with me, kid. No take-backsies. I operate on gacha mechanics. You feed me mana. I summon entities from across the multiverse to defend your sorry hide. Think of it as a high-stakes lottery where the prize is not dying." Asterisk. The core's tone was flippant, almost bored, but Elias could sense an undercurrent of immense power. Bonded? He'd heard of dungeon cores, sentient artifacts that controlled monsters spawning and dungeon layouts. but never one that spoke like a cynical game show host. I don't understand, Elias said, his voice trembling. I need a core fragment to avoid expulsion. Asterisk expulsion? Please, you've hit the jackpot. Fragments are trash. I'm the whole package. But we've got problems. This crypt is about to get lively. Rival cores sensed our bond. They don't like competition. You're gonna need defenders, and fast. Asterisk. Before Elias could respond, the core glow intensified. A holographic interface appeared before him, displaying a colorful screen with a large button labeled 10 roll. Mana began draining from him, a sudden pull that made him stagger. He felt weak, as if the core was drinking his life force. Asterisk. First summon. 10 roll initiated. Standard procedure for newbies. Pray for an SSR, or you're dead meat. Here we go. Asterisk. The room vibrated, the runes on the walls blazing brighter. Elias watched, horrified and mesmerized, as 10 glowing orbs materialized in the air above the core, spinning rapidly like lottery balls. His fate, and perhaps his very survival, was now a game of chance. Elias's vision swam as the last of his mana drained away, pulled into the glowing orb that now pulsed against his palm like a second heartbeat. The chamber around him, a forgotten crypt of moss-covered stone and crumbling pillars, seemed to tilt on its axis. He could feel the energy leaving him in a cold rush, as if his very life force were being siphoned through that point of contact. Mana depletion at 87%, the core's voice echoed in his mind, its tone dripping with synthetic cheer. Don't worry, loser. This is perfectly normal for a first-time bond. Well, normal-ish. Some people pass out. Try not to die. It'd be a terrible waste of a perfectly good tutorial. Elias gritted his teeth, his knees buckling as he slumped against the stone pedestal where the core had rested moments before. The air in the chamber grew thick with ozone and something else, a crackling anticipation that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. Above the pedestal, 10 shimmering portals of light began to form, arranged in a perfect circle. Each was the size of his fist, swirling with colors that shifted from pale blue to deep violet. Initiating first summon sequence, the core announced. 10 roll, standard rates. Let's see what the multiverse coughs up for you. Odds are 70% N rank, 20% R rank, 8% SR rank, 2% SSR rank. Pray to whatever gods you believe in, though given your track record, they probably aren't listening. Elias wanted to snap back, to demand answers, but his throat was too dry. All he could do was watch as the first portal flashed brightly. With a soft pop, something small and gelatinous plopped onto the stone floor. It was a slime. A tiny, wobbling blob of translucent blue goo, no larger than his fist. It quivered for a moment, then let out a faint, bubbling sound that might have been a sigh. Summon result. N-rank slime, the core said. Common as dirt. Weak to pointy sticks and mildly harsh language. Next, another flash, another pop. A second slime, this one slightly greener, joined the first. Then a third, a fourth, each identical in their pathetic wobbling. By the seventh, Elias felt a sinking dread in his stomach. This was it. After all that build-up, after bonding with this strange core, he was getting slimes? The same academy bullies who mocked him could conjure better with their eyes closed. 8 N-rank slimes, the core narrated, its voice taking on a bored edge. Honestly, I've seen better luck from a rock. One more to go. Maybe you'll get a slightly larger slime? Ooh, exciting. The 9th portal flashed. Another slime plopped out, this one with a faint yellowish tint. It immediately began trying to absorb a pebble, failing miserably. Elias's hope, fragile as it was, shattered. He'd been a fool to think anything would change. He was still the Academy's worst summoner. Only now, he was a dungeon core's worst summoner too. He closed his eyes, bracing for the core's mockery. But the 10th portal didn't flash immediately. Instead, it began to pulse with a deep, resonant gold light. The air in the chamber grew heavy, charged with a power that made Elias's skin prickle. The slimes around him stopped wobbling and huddled together, as if sensing something greater. Oh, the core's voice lost its sarcastic edge for a moment, replaced by genuine surprise. Well, looks like the universe has a sense of humor after all. The golden portal expanded, swirling into a vortex of light. From its center, a figure began to emerge. First the tip of a gleaming silver boot, then armored greaves, a skirt of scaled plates, and finally, a full form clad in intricate dragon scale armor that shimmered with embedded rubies. She landed lightly on the stone floor, the impact sending a small shockwave that made the slimes quiver. Elias stared, his breath catching in his throat. She was tall, nearly his height, with silver hair tied back in a practical braid that fell to her waist. Her eyes were a piercing amber, narrowed as they swept the chamber before settling on him. In one hand, she held a great sword nearly as tall as she was, its blade etched with runes that glowed with inner fire. Dragon wings, not feathered, but leathery and powerful, were folded against her back, their tips brushing the floor. Summon result: SSR rank Dragon Knight, designation Aria. The core announced, its voice now tinged with something like pride. Rarity, super rare. Combat specialization, frontline assault, dragon fire projection, tactical leadership. Personality profile, Sundara. Good luck with that. Aria's gaze locked onto Elias. She took a step forward, her armor clinking softly. Up close, he could see the fine details, the way each scale overlapped perfectly, the faint heat radiating from her body, the disdain etched into her expression. You, she said, her voice low and edged with steel. You're the one who summoned me? Elias managed a nod, his mouth dry. She scoffed, turning her head slightly, as if she couldn't bear to look at him directly. Pathetic. I felt stronger bonds from children pulling on my cloak. What kind of master are you, to have so little mana? Before Elias could respond, not that he had any response, the core chimed in. The classic Sundara introduction. I hate you, but I'm contractually obligated to protect you. Don't take it personally, Elias. She'll warm up to you. Probably. Maybe after a few near-death experiences. Aria's eyes flickered, as if she could hear the core's commentary. And what is this thing? She asked, gesturing with her sword toward the orb in Elias's hand. Your new home, the core chirped. Welcome to the Gacha Dungeon core system. I'm the interface, the announcer, and your sarcastic guide to not dying horribly. Elias here is your designated master. Try not to kill him. It'd be bad for morale. Aria's grip tightened on her sword. I did not ask to be summoned into some game. None of us did. The core said, its tone shifting to something almost serious. But here we are. The bond is formed. You're linked to Elias, and he's linked to this dungeon. Your loyalty will grow through interactions, training, talking, shared battles. The stronger the bond, the more of your true power you can access. Think of it as a raising simulator with stakes. Elias finally found his voice. What does that mean? It means, Aria cut in, still not looking at him, that I am not some mindless servant. I have my own will, my own past. She paused, her amber eyes distant for a moment. I was a knight once, in a world where dragons and humans warred. I fell in battle, and now, I am here. The core hummed softly. Every summon has a history. Aria's is particularly tragic. Lots of dragon-related angst. But that's for later bonding sessions. Right now, we have more pressing issues. As if on cue, the chamber trembled. It started as a faint vibration in the stone beneath their feet, then grew into a proper shudder that sent dust cascading from the ceiling. The slimes wobbled anxiously, huddling closer together. Aria's head snapped up, her body tensing. What was that? Elias asked, his heart hammering against his ribs. That, the core said, its voice dropping to a whisper, is the downside of bonding with a dungeon core. Every core in the vicinity can sense a new bond forming. It's like lighting a beacon in the dark, and some of them don't like newcomers. Another tremor, stronger this time. From somewhere deeper in the crypt, Elias heard the distant sound of scraping stone and guttural chattering. Goblins, Aria said, her voice cold. A pack of them, drawn to the mana surge. She turned to Elias, her expression unreadable. How many? Sensors indicate 12, the core reported. Standard dungeon fodder. In-rank threats individually, but in numbers. Well, let's just say your slimes aren't going to be much help. Elias looked at the 9 wobbling blobs at his feet. One of them was still trying to eat the pebble. He felt a wave of despair. What do we do? Aria sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. She hefted her great sword, the runes along its blade flaring to life with a warm, orange glow. We fight. Or rather, I fight. You, she glanced at him, her eyes sweeping over his academy robes, still torn from his earlier flight. You stay behind me, and try not to die. Bonding tip, the core interjected. This is a great opportunity for shared combat. Nothing brings people together like near-death experiences. Elias, try giving her a command. See if she listens. Elias swallowed. Arya, defend the chamber. She didn't move for a moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Acknowledged, master. The title sounded like it left a bad taste in her mouth, but she said it all the same. Elias felt a faint pulse through the bond. A thread of connection, thin but real. The scraping sounds grew louder, accompanied by sniffing and clicking tongues. From the dark corridor leading into the chamber, shapes began to emerge, small, hunched creatures with greenish skin, pointed ears, and beady eyes that gleamed with malice. They carried crude spears and clubs, their mouths twisted into hungry grins as they spotted Elias and Arya. Goblins, the core narrated. N-rank mobs. Weak to fire, sharp objects, and basic hygiene. Arya, you're up. Arya didn't wait for further prompting. She took 2 steps forward, planting herself between Elias and the advancing goblins. Her wings unfurled slightly, casting long shadows across the floor. The lead goblin, a larger one with a necklace of bones, let out a screech and charged. Elias expected her to meet it head-on. Instead, Arya took a deep breath, her chest expanding beneath her armor. When she exhaled, it wasn't air that left her lips, it was fire. A torrent of dragon fire, white-hot and roaring, erupted from her mouth. It filled the corridor, washing over the goblins in a wave of incineration. Their screeches turned to screams, then to silence as the fire dissipated, leaving behind nothing but ash and the smell of burnt meat. Elias stared, his mind struggling to process what he'd just seen. One breath. That was all it took. Dragon fire projection, the core said cheerfully. Standard SSR ability. Pretty, isn't it? Mana cost, minimal for her, thanks to her innate dragon heritage. For you, it'd probably kill you. Good thing she's on our side. Arya lowered her sword, the runes fading. She didn't look back at Elias. They're dealt with. For now. But the chamber continued to tremble. From deeper in the crypt, more chattering arose. This time, accompanied by heavier footsteps. More? Elias asked, his voice barely a whisper. The first wave was just scouts, the core said. The real threat is coming. Another core has taken notice. It's sending something bigger. Arya's grip on her sword tightened again. She glanced over her shoulder, her amber eyes meeting Elias's for the first time without outright disdain. There was something else there, a flicker of recognition, of shared danger. Fine, she said, turning back to face the dark corridor. I'll protect you for now. She raised her sword, the blade catching the faint light of the core's glow. Her wings spread fully, casting the chamber in shadow. But don't get any ideas, master. The acrid scent of burnt goblin flesh hung heavy in the chamber. Elias watched, wide-eyed, as the last of the green-skinned creatures dissolved into ash under Arya's dragon fire. Her sword, still glowing with residual heat, cut through the smoky air as she sheathed it with a practiced flick of her wrist. Pathetic, she muttered, not bothering to look at him. Is this the best your enemies can muster? I've seen slimes put up more of a fight. Elias swallowed hard, his heart still hammering against his ribs. The goblins had come in a snarling pack of 10, their crude clubs raised high as they charged from the tunnel entrance. He'd frozen, his mind blank with panic. Years of summoning failures had left him utterly unprepared for actual combat. But Arya had moved like a storm. One moment she was standing beside him, arms crossed in disapproval. The next, she was a blur of silver armor and crimson fire, reducing the creatures to cinders in seconds. The chamber itself seemed to breathe with them. The walls, carved from ancient, dark stone, pulsed with a faint blue light emanating from the dungeon core at its center. The orb floated serenely, its surface swirling with constellations of mana. Scorch marks now marred the floor where Arya's fire had licked the stone, and the air was thick with the aftermath of violence. Well done, meatbag, the core's voice echoed, dripping with sarcasm. Your SSR-rank Dragon Knight has successfully eliminated 10 N-rank goblins. Combat efficiency, 98%. Bonding progress, 0.1%. Seriously, You two could bond faster if you stared at each other in awkward silence. Oh wait, you're already doing that. Elias flinched. I didn't know what to do. They just came at us. Obviously, Arya said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes, a sharp amber that seemed to glow in the dim light, narrowed. You're weak. Untrained. A liability. But the Corps chose you, for some unfathomable reason. So here I am. She tapped the hilt of her sword. But protection requires more than my blade. You need to learn to command. Command. Elias echoed, his voice small. Through the mental link, the Corps interjected. Initiated during bonding. Think of it as a private chatroom, but with more life or death stakes. Try it, loser. Focus on Arya and send a thought. Elias closed his eyes, trying to ignore the Corps' jab. He thought of Arya, her stern expression, the way her armor gleamed. Tentatively, he pushed a thought outward. Thank you. Arya's voice echoed in his mind, clear and sharp. Don't thank me. I'm bound to defend you, not coddle you. Next time, don't just stand there like a startled rabbit. Use the link to coordinate. Her mental tone was less hostile than her spoken words, but only slightly. Elias opened his eyes, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. It worked. Barely, Arya said aloud. Your mental presence is like a whisper in a hurricane, but it's a start. She walked over to the Corps, her boots clicking against the stone. The tremors have stopped. For now, but more will come. Rival Corps don't take kindly to new arrivals. The Corps pulsed brighter. Analysis complete. Threat level, low. But bonding is critical. Loyalty isn't automatic, meatbag. You need to talk. Share feelings. Maybe have a heartfelt moment over a campfire, if we had one. Current bonding level with Arya, 5%. At this rate, you'll unlock her full abilities by the time this dungeon crumbles to dust. Elias took a deep breath. The Corps was right. He'd spent so long being mocked at the academy that genuine connection felt foreign. But Arya had saved his life. The least he could do was try. He approached her slowly, noting how she tensed, her hand drifting back to her sword. Arya, can you tell me about yourself? Where you come from? She scoffed. What does it matter? I'm here now, bound to this place. It matters to me, Elias said, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. The Corps said bonding grows through interactions. I want to understand you, not just as a summon, but as a person. Arya studied him for a long moment, her amber eyes searching his face. Finally, she sighed, a soft, weary sound. Fine, but don't expect a tragic tale to win my sympathy. She leaned against the wall, her armor scraping against the stone. I was a knight in my world, a dragon rider, sworn to protect my kingdom from a scourge of shadow beasts. We fought for years. I was good at it. Too good, perhaps. Her voice grew distant. There was a battle at the Crimson Pass. My dragon, Ignis, and I led the vanguard. We pushed too deep, too fast. The shadows surrounded us. I ordered a retreat, but my unit hesitated. They believed in my invincibility. A foolish notion. She clenched her fist. Ignis fell, pierced by a dozen shadow spears. I tried to save him, but the bond it shattered. I felt him die, and in that moment of weakness, the shadows overwhelmed me. I should have died there, with him. Elias listened, his heart aching. He saw the pain in her eyes, raw and unguarded. But you didn't. No, she whispered. I woke up here, in this orb of light, with that insufferable Corps announcing my summon, as if it were some grand prize. A fallen knight, stripped of her dragon, bound to a summoner who can't even conjure a decent wisp. She looked at him, and for the first time, her expression wasn't just disdain, it was shared bitterness. So you see, Master, we're both failures. You and your magic, me and my duty. The Corps chimed in. Bonding progress, 15%. Wow, sharing trauma really works. Who knew? Now kiss and make up. Oh wait, that's not in the manual. Moving on. Arya glared at the orb. Must you ruin every moment? It's my primary function, the Corps replied cheerfully. But seriously, meatbag, this is good. However, emotional breakthroughs won't stop monsters. Your mana has partially regenerated. Recommend a single summon to bolster defenses. Current mana level, enough for one pull. Want to roll the dice? Elias hesitated. The memory of his first 10 roll, the 9 useless slimes, still stung. But Aria's story had stirred something in him. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for her, for a chance to prove they weren't failures. "Do it," he said, his voice firm. Initiating single summon, the core announced. Mana streamed from Elias, a silvery light that flowed into the orb. It spun rapidly, colors flashing, green, blue, purple, before settling on a steady blue glow. Rarity, R rank. Not bad for a consolation prize. A figure materialized in a shower of azure sparks. A young woman stumbled forward, nearly tripping over her own feet. She wore simple leather armor, a quiver of arrows slung across her back, and held a wooden bow that looked slightly too large for her. Her hair was a messy bob of chestnut brown, and her eyes, wide with confusion, darted around the chamber. Hello," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm Lyra. I think I'm supposed to be an archer, but my last shot hit my own commander's helmet. Accidentally. Mostly." Elias couldn't help but smile. She was clumsy, nervous, nothing like the fierce Arya. But there was an earnestness in her eyes that reminded him of himself. "Welcome, Lyra. I'm Elias. This is Arya, and that's the core." Lyra bowed awkwardly, almost dropping her bow. "Nice to meet you. I'll do my best, Master Elias. Though my best might involve some collateral damage." Arya pinched the bridge of her nose. "An R-rank archer with poor aim. Wonderful. Just what we need." "Bonding opportunity," the core chirped. Lyra's loyalty starts at 20%. She's eager to please. But her combat stats are suboptimal. Training required. Suggest immediate drills before the next wave hits. Elias nodded. "Let's train. Lyra, show me what you can do." They moved to a clearer section of the chamber. Arya conjured a few small, floating orbs of fire as targets, her control precise. Lyra knocked an arrow, her hands shaking. She drew the bowstring, took a deep breath, and released. The arrow sailed wide, clattering against the far wall. "I'm sorry," Lyra said, her cheeks flushing. "Don't apologize," Elias said gently. "Try again. Focus on the target, not your fear." He remembered his own struggles at the academy, the sneers, the pressure. He reached out through the mental link, not to command, but to encourage. "Asterisk, you can do this, Lyra. I believe in you." Asterisk. Lyra's eyes widened slightly, and she nodded. This time, her shot grazed the edge of the fire orb, extinguishing it with a hiss. "Progress," Elias said, grinning. They spent the next hour training. Arya drilled Lyra on stance and breathing, her criticism sharp but not unkind. Elias used the mental link to offer pointers, feeling a strange warmth as Lyra's accuracy improved slowly. With each successful shot, her confidence grew, and Elias felt their bond strengthening, a subtle thread of trust weaving between them. The core provided running commentary. "Bonding with Lyra, 35%. She's starting to like you, meatbag. Maybe because you're not yelling at her." Novel concept. Meanwhile, bonding with Arya, 18%. "She's softening, I can feel it. Like a rock slowly eroding in a gentle breeze." Very slowly. As the training wound down, Elias felt a surge of mana from the core, a faint, distant pulse that echoed through the dungeon's stone. Alert. External sensors detect mana fluctuations at the surface entrance. Scouting party identified. 2 humans, academy uniforms. They're poking around. Looks like your little energy surge during the summon attracted attention. Elias's blood ran cold. The academy. They'd found him. High above, at the dungeon's moss-covered entrance, 2 figures in blue and silver robes peered into the darkness. One, a lanky youth with a scrying crystal, frowned. "The readings are off the charts, Kale. This isn't just some forgotten crypt. There's an active core down there, and its signature is weird. Like nothing I've ever seen." The other figure, Kale, Elias's longtime tormentor, smirked. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a cruel glint in his eyes. "Of course it's weird. That failure." Elias stumbled into something he shouldn't have. "I always knew he'd crack under pressure." He took the crystal, his expression turning greedy. "This energy, it's potent. Powerful. Maybe even divine. And that loser has it all to himself." He handed the crystal back. "Report to the headmaster. Tell him we've located an anomalous dungeon core, possibly a new class. And that Elias is harboring it." His smirk widened. "I'll lead the raid team myself. We'll seize that core for study. and put that failure in his place once and for all. As the scouts retreated, Kale stared into the abyss, his voice a low, venomous whisper carried on the wind. That failure has something powerful. We raid at dawn. Below, in the heart of the dungeon, Elias felt a chill crawl down his spine. He didn't hear the words, but he knew. The academy was coming. And with them, Kale. He looked at Arya, her face set in grim determination, and Lyra, who now stood a little taller, her bow held with newfound steadiness. The core pulsed anxiously. Well, meatbag, it said, its sarcasm tinged with urgency. You've got a dragon knight with trust issues, an archer who's just learning to hit the broadside of a castle, and a bunch of slimes that are probably off somewhere making mucus art. Against an academy raid led by your personal bully. Want a roll for reinforcements? Or shall we start writing your epitaph? Elias took a deep breath. The fear was still there, gnawing at his insides. But beneath it, something else stirred, a resolve forged in fire and shared stories. He met Arya's eyes, and she gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. We'll be ready, Elias said, and for the first time, he almost believed it. The morning after Kale's scouts had spotted the dungeon's energy surge, Elias woke to the sound of Lyra's arrows thudding against a makeshift target. He rubbed his eyes, the dim glow of the dungeon core casting long shadows across the chamber. Arya stood guard by the entrance, her dragon-scale armor gleaming faintly in the light, her expression as stern as ever. You're improving, Elias said, walking over to where Lyra was practicing. The R-rank archer, a young woman with tousled brown hair and earnest green eyes, blushed at the praise. Her previous shots had been scattered, but now they clustered closer to the center of the target, a piece of old dungeon wall they'd repurposed. Thank you, Master, Lyra said, knocking another arrow. I want to be useful, not like those slimes. She gestured toward the corner where 9 N-rank slimes wobbled aimlessly, their gelatinous forms occasionally bumping into each other. The core had dubbed them useless loot box filler, in its usual sarcastic tone. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. You are useful. Accuracy comes with practice and confidence. Remember what I told you. Breathe out as you release. Lyra nodded, drawing the bowstring back. Her muscles trembled slightly, but she steadied herself, exhaling slowly. The arrow flew true, embedding itself dead center in the target. A wide grin spread across her face. I did it. See? Elias smiled back, feeling a surge of pride. This was what the core meant by bonding. Not just summoning, but building trust. He could feel a faint thread of connection strengthening between them, like a thin cord of mana humming with potential. From across the room, the dungeon core pulsed with a mocking light. Oh, look at the heartwarming training montage. How touching. But while you're playing archery, coach, might I remind you that we have incoming threats. Rival cores don't take kindly to newbies on their turf. Elias tensed. What kind of threats? The core's voice echoed, dripping with sarcasm. Shadow wolves. Nasty things. Fast, silent, and they love to snack on summoners. Detected them moving through the lower tunnels. Estimated arrival, 10 minutes. Might want to roll for some backup, unless you think your dynamic duo can handle a pack of 20. Arya turned from her post, her hand resting on the hilt of her greatsword. 20? That's manageable, but not ideal. Her tsundere demeanor softened slightly with concern. Master, we should prepare. Elias's mind raced. The core was right, they needed more summons. He had been hoarding the mana that slowly regenerated from the dungeon's ambient energy, afraid to waste it on another disappointing pull. But now, with Kale's raid looming at dawn and immediate danger approaching, hesitation could be fatal. How much mana do I have? He asked the core. Enough for a 10 roll. Barely. Your pitiful regeneration rate is like watching paint dry, but it'll have to do. Want to gamble your life away? The odds are terrible as always. Elias took a deep breath. Do it. Perform the summon. The core glowed brighter, its surface swirling with colors. Initiating 10 roll. Let's see if luck favors the foolish today. Mana drained from Elias in a rush, leaving him lightheaded. He staggered, leaning against the wall as orbs of light materialized in the air before him. One by one, they popped, revealing their contents. The first 9 were, as predicted, disappointments. More slimes, in rank. A broken dagger, in rank. A squeaky toy that resembled a goblin, in rank. A pile of glowing rocks, N rank. A scroll of basic fire magic, R rank, but duplicate of one he already had. 2 more slimes, and a rusty shield, N rank. Elias's heart sank with each reveal. The core cackled. Wow, what a haul. Trash, trash, and more trash. At least the slimes can be fused later. Oh wait, you don't know about that feature yet. Spoilers. But the 10th orb shimmered with a silver gold light, different from the others. It burst open, and a figure emerged, floating gently to the ground. She was an angelic being with soft white wings, wearing simple robes that glowed with a gentle radiance. Her eyes were kind, and she held a staff topped with a crystalline orb. SR rank healer, Seraphina, at your service, she said, her voice like a soothing melody. I sense distress here. How may I assist? Elias stared, relief washing over him. An SR rank. And a healer. Exactly what they needed. Thank you, he managed. We're about to be attacked. Can you help us? Seraphina nodded, her wings rustling softly. I shall bolster your spirits and mend your wounds. Do not fear. Before Elias could respond, a low growl echoed from the tunnel entrance. Shadow wolves emerged, their forms dark and insubstantial, like living shadows with glowing red eyes. They moved silently, padding forward with predatory grace. Arya immediately stepped in front of Elias, her sword blazing with dragon fire. Lyra, take the flanks. Seraphina, stay back and support. Lyra knocked an arrow, her hands steady now. Yes, Lady Arya. The battle began in a blur of motion. Arya charged, her sword cutting through the first wolf, which dissipated into smoke. But more poured in, surrounding them. Lyra fired arrows, her improved accuracy striking true. One wolf yelped as an arrow pierced its shadowy form. Seraphina raised her staff, and a warm light enveloped the group. Elias felt a surge of energy, his fatigue fading. Morale boost active, she announced. Your strength is renewed. The core commented from the sidelines. Nice. The angel's buffing you. Too bad she can't buff your luck with summons. Those shadow wolves are R-rank minions, by the way. Your trash slimes are just standing there looking confused. Classic N-rank behavior. Elias ignored the jab, focusing on the fight. He used his mental link with Arya, directing her movements. Arya, sweep left. Lyra, aim for the leader, the bigger one in the back. His commands were crisp, and they responded seamlessly. Arya's dragon fire incinerated 3 wolves at once, while Lyra's arrow struck the alpha wolf in the eye, causing it to stagger. But the wolves were relentless. One slipped past Arya and lunged at Elias. He stumbled backward, but Seraphina intervened, casting a barrier of light that repelled the creature. Stay close, master, she said gently. As the battle raged, Elias realized they were holding their own, but barely. The wolves kept coming, and Arya was tiring, her movements slowing. We need to end this, he muttered. Oh, having trouble, the core chimed in. Maybe if you had better summons. Hey, I just remembered. Since you got duplicate slimes, want to know a neat trick? Fusion. You can combine duplicate N-rank summons to create stronger versions. It's like recycling trash into slightly less trashy trash. Want to try? It might give you an edge. Elias's eyes widened. Fusion? How does it work? Simple. Feed me the duplicates, and I'll merge them. For example, those 9 slimes. Fuse 3 of them, and you get a bigger slime with slightly better stats. It's not much, but it's something. Could be useful as cannon fodder. So, want to waste time on this mid-battle, or keep getting chewed on by shadow puppets? Do it, Elias ordered. Fuse 3 slimes. The core glowed, and 3 of the wobbling slimes were drawn into its light. They merged with a squelching sound, forming a larger, slightly more menacing slime, now our rank. It oozed forward, engulfing a shadow wolf that got too close. The wolf struggled, then dissolved. See? Not totally useless now, the core said. You can fuse more later. Maybe turn all those slimes into one mega slime. Wouldn't that be adorable? With the fused slime helping, the tide turned. Arya, reinvigorated by Seraphina's healing light, unleashed a final burst of dragon fire, clearing the remaining wolves. The chamber fell silent, save for the heavy breathing of the combatants. Elias slumped against the wall, exhausted but relieved. Seraphina approached him, her staff glowing softly. You are wounded, master. She touched his arm, where a wolf's claw had grazed him, and the skin knit together seamlessly. Rest now. The immediate threat is gone. Lyra lowered her bow, grinning. We did it. And my arrows. They actually hit. Arya sheathed her sword, giving a curt nod. Acceptable performance. But we cannot grow complacent. Kale's raid comes at dawn. Elias looked at his small party. Arya, the Tsundere dragon knight. Lyra, the eager archer. Seraphina, the gentle healer. And even the fused slime, now wobbling proudly. They were a ragtag group, but they were his. The bonding threads felt stronger now. He could sense Arya's grudging respect, Lyra's devotion, and Seraphina's serene loyalty. But as he basked in the momentary victory, Seraphina suddenly stiffened, her wings flaring. She turned toward the dungeon floor, her expression troubled. Master, she whispered, her melodic voice tinged with unease. Something stirs below us. Something ancient and dark. I can feel it, a presence that has slept for eons, now awakening. Elias followed her gaze to the stone floor, where cracks had begun to form, glowing with a faint, ominous light. The core pulsed rapidly. Oh, that's not good. Seraphina's right. My sensors are picking up seismic activity from deep underground. Looks like your dungeon sitting on top of something nasty. And it's waking up. Arya placed a hand on her sword again. What is it? Seraphina closed her eyes, concentrating. I cannot say for certain, but it feels divine in nature, yet corrupted. A trial, perhaps, or a trap. Master, we must prepare. This presence, it is far more dangerous than shadow wolves or rival cores. The cracks widened slightly, and a low rumble echoed through the chamber. Elias's heart pounded. With Kale's raid hours away and now this new threat, he realized his gamble for survival was far from over. He looked at his summons, their faces set with determination, and knew that the real test was just beginning. Everyone, stay alert, he said, his voice firm. We'll face whatever comes together. Seraphina nodded, her light dimming as she focused on the ground. It approaches, Master. Something ancient awakens beneath us. The tremor that followed Seraphina's warning was not the subtle vibration of distant footsteps, but a deep, groaning crack that split the dungeon floor like overripe fruit. Elias stumbled back, his boots scraping against stone as a jagged line raced from the chamber's center toward the far wall. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling, and the ever-present glow of the dungeon core, now a familiar orb embedded in the wall, flickered erratically. What in the abyss? Arya's voice cut through the rumbling, her armored hand already on the hilt of her dragon-forged sword. She stepped between Elias and the widening fissure, her crimson hair stirring in the sudden updraft of stale air. Lyra knocked an arrow, her fingers trembling only slightly. It's breathing, she whispered, her eyes wide as the crack deepened into a chasm. Seraphina floated closer, her angelic wings shedding soft light into the darkness below. The presence I sensed, it's not hostile, Master. Not exactly. It feels ancient, waiting. Before Elias could respond, the dungeon core's voice echoed in his mind, its usual sarcasm replaced by a rare note of solemnity. Asterisk, congratulations, Master Elias. You've triggered a hidden event. Trial of the Creator. Looks like my old boss left a pop quiz for you. Try not to fail. It'd be embarrassing for both of us. Asterisk. Trial? What trial? Elias muttered aloud, his heart pounding. He could feel the core's interface overlaying his vision. Glowing runes scrolled past, detailing something called Divine Proving Grounds. The floor gave way completely then, collapsing into a yawning pit. Elias yelped, but Arya grabbed his arm, her grip iron-strong as she hauled him back from the edge. Below, a staircase of worn stone spiraled downward, illuminated by pulsating runes carved into the walls. The air grew colder, carrying the scent of ozone and old magic. We have to go down, Elias said, more to himself than the others. The core's prompt flashed in his mind. Asterisk, objective, survive the trial. Reward, system upgrade, unlock SSR plus rarity tier. Failure. Well, let's not think about that. Your mana might get permanently drained. Or worse. Asterisk. Arya shot him a sharp look. You're actually considering this? After that wolf attack, we should be fortifying, not diving into some god's basement. The core says it's necessary, Elias replied, trying to sound confident. Inside, his thoughts churned. Asterisk, what if this is a trap? What if I get us all killed? Asterisk, but another part of him, the part tired of being the Academy's failure, whispered that this was his chance. A real test, not another mockery. Serafina drifted toward the staircase. The energy here is structured. It reminds me of the celestial trials from my home. A test of worth, not mere destruction. Lyra lowered her bow slightly. I'll follow you, Master. Whatever comes. With a deep breath, Elias led the way down. The stairs seemed endless, the runes on the walls shifting as they passed, depicting scenes of cosmic battles, fallen stars, and a lone figure crafting dungeon cores from starlight. The core's voice piped up occasionally, offering commentary. Asterisk. Ah, there's the creator. Bit of a drama queen, honestly. Loved his flashy runes. Asterisk. At the bottom, they emerged into a vast, circular chamber. The ceiling soared into darkness, but the floor was a mosaic of intricate runes that glowed with a soft, blue light. In the center stood a stone pedestal, upon which hovered a ghostly image of a robed figure, its features blurred but radiating immense power. Welcome, Inheritor. The image spoke, its voice echoing as if from across millennia. I am Ethel, the Fallen. You have bonded with my creation, the Gacha core. Now, prove you are worthy of its potential. Survive the Phantom Legion, and the core's true capabilities shall unfold. Before Elias could ask questions, the runes on the floor flared brightly. From the shadows at the chamber's edges, figures materialized, armored knights, translucent and shimmering like mist given form. They wielded ethereal swords and shields, their eyes glowing with pale fire. A dozen of them, moving with silent, deadly precision. Phantom Knights, Arya growled, falling into a fighting stance. I've faced their kind before. They're fast, and their weapons can bypass armor if you're not careful. Lyra fired an arrow. It passed straight through the lead knight, doing nothing. They're immune to physical attacks. Serafina raised her hands, a halo of light forming around her. They're spiritual entities. We need magic or empowered strikes. The core's interface updated. Asterisk. Trial in progress. Phantom Knights X12. Weakness. Bond-enhanced attacks. Suggestion. Use your links, Master. Or die artistically. Asterisk. Elias's mind raced. Bond-enhanced attacks? He focused on Arya, feeling the mental thread that connected them. A thin, glowing line in his perception. He pushed his will through it. Arya, channel your dragon fire through our bond. Aim for their cores. Arya's eyes widened, but she didn't hesitate. She raised her sword, and instead of her usual fiery breath, a stream of white-hot flame erupted from the blade, tinged with Elias's mana. It struck a phantom knight, and the creature screamed silently, dissolving into motes of light. It worked, Elias exclaimed, a surge of triumph washing over him. But the other knights advanced swiftly. Two lunged at Lyra. Serafina cast a barrier of light, slowing them, but one sword grazed Lyra's arm. She cried out, a faint, ghostly wound appearing on her skin. Master, I can't hit them. Lyra gasped, firing another useless arrow. Elias turned to her, his thoughts frantic. How do I bond with an archer against spirits? Then he remembered. Encouragement, trust. He reached out through their link, not with a command, but with a memory. The moment she'd first hit a target perfectly, her smile bright. Lyra, your arrows aren't just wood and metal. They're your will. Believe in them. Lyra's expression shifted from fear to determination. She knocked another arrow, and this time, it glowed with a soft, green light, the color of Elias's mana. She let it fly, and it pierced a phantom knight's chest, the creature dissipating instantly. Yes. Elias cheered, but the effort drained him. He could feel his mana dipping, the core's interface showing a rapid decline. Arya was holding off 3 knights, her bonded dragon fire cutting through them, but she was tiring. Elias, there are too many, she shouted, parrying a blow that sent sparks flying. Serafina floated above, healing energy washing over them, but it was a stopgap. The core chimed in. Asterisk, mana at 30%. Might want to wrap this up, Master. Or start writing your last will. Asterisk. Elias scanned the chamber. 6 knights remained, closing in. His bond with Arya felt strong, but with Lyra and Serafina, it was newer, thinner. He needed something more. An idea struck. the fusion feature. He still had those duplicate slimes in the core's storage, mindless N-ranks from earlier rolls. Core, fuse all slimes into one and summon it here, he commanded mentally. Asterisk, ooh, creative. Executing fusion. 10 N-rank slimes, 1 R-rank mega slime. Summoning. Asterisk. A gelatinous blob plopped onto the floor, larger than a man, quivering with acidic potential. It was dumb, but Elias pushed his will through the core's control link. Mega slime, engulfed that night. The slime oozed forward, swallowing a phantom night hole. The spirit struggled, but the slime's bonded nature, infused with Elias's mana, dissolved it slowly. It bought time. Arya cut down 2 more, Lyra picked off another. But the last knight lunged at Elias, its sword aimed for his heart. Elias froze, his mind blank with terror. Master! Arya screamed, but she was too far. In that split second, Elias didn't think of commands. He thought of Arya, her tsundere pride, her reluctant loyalty, the way she'd saved him before. He poured all his trust into their bond, a raw, wordless plea. Arya moved faster than ever before. She didn't swing her sword. She threw it, a streak of bonded dragon fire. It impaled the knight from behind, and the phantom shattered. Silence fell. The runes on the floor dimmed, and the ghostly image of Ethel nodded slowly. Well done, inheritor. You used bonds not as tools, but as connections. The core's true purpose is not mere summoning, but unity. Your reward. The pedestal glowed, and energy surged into Elias. The core's voice was almost giddy. Asterisk, trial complete. System upgrading. Rarity tiers expanded. SSR Plus now available. Base rates improved slightly. And oh, you get a fancy title, Bonded Prover. Try not to let it go to your head. Asterisk. Elias collapsed to his knees, exhaustion washing over him. His mana was nearly empty, his body trembling. Arya rushed to his side. Her usual disdain softened with concern. You idiot. You could have died. But we didn't. Elias managed a weak smile. He looked at Lyra, who was nursing her arm with Seraphina's help, and the mega slime bubbling contentedly. For a moment, he felt a flicker of pride. Then, the core's voice turned urgent. Asterisk, incoming alert. External threat detected. Multiple mana signatures at the dungeon entrance. They're sealing the exits. Audio feed patched through. Asterisk. A familiar, sneering voice echoed through the chamber, transmitted via the core's sensors. Time to claim that core, failure. Hope you've enjoyed playing Dungeon Master. It ends now. Kale. Elias's blood ran cold. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled. Arya caught him, her grip firm. We're not ready, Lyra whispered, her face pale. Seraphina's healing light washed over Elias, but it only eased the fatigue slightly. Master, we must retreat deeper by time. Elias looked at his summons. Arya's determined eyes, Lyra's resolve, Seraphina's calm, even the slime's mindless loyalty. The core's upgrade hummed in his mind, promising greater power, but it was useless if he couldn't move. Above, the sound of sealing magic thrummed through the stone. Kale's raid had begun, and Elias was trapped, exhausted, with only a handful of bonded allies against an academy elite team. The trial had proven his worth, but now, a real battle waited, and he had nothing left to give. The dungeon entrance hall echoed with the heavy thud of sealing magic. Elias leaned against the cold stone wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The trial had drained him more than he'd admitted. His mana reserves felt like shallow puddles after a drought. But there was no time to rest. Through the mental link with the dungeon core, he could feel the pressure of multiple magical signatures gathering outside. They're here, he whispered, pushing himself upright. Arya stood before him, her dragon-scale armor gleaming in the dim light of the core's ambient glow. Her crimson eyes narrowed. I count 12 distinct mana signatures. 3 heavy combatants, for ranged casters, 2 support healers, and 3 scouts. She rested a hand on the hilt of her greatsword. Amateurs. They move like academy students, not seasoned raiders. Lyra fidgeted with her bowstring, her ears twitching nervously. The R-rank archer had improved dramatically through their bonding sessions, but confidence still eluded her. Master Elias, the entrance seals, they're using Tier 3 containment runes. We can't escape that way. Seraphina floated nearby, Her angelic wings folded gracefully. The SR rank healer placed a gentle hand on Elias's shoulder, and a warm glow spread through his fatigue. Your exhaustion runs deep, Master. I can sustain you for the battle, but you must conserve your strength. Elias nodded, his mind racing. The Gacha core hummed in his consciousness, its sarcastic interface flashing before his eyes. System alert. Hostile raid party detected. Recommendation: surrender and offer core for disassembly. Just kidding. Roll for defense, asterisk asterisk. Not now, Elias muttered, swiping the notification away mentally. Core, give me tactical overlay of the entrance hall. A three-dimensional map materialized in his vision. The entrance hall was a rectangular chamber 50 paces long, with pillars supporting a vaulted ceiling. Their fused slimes, 9 N-rank blobs merged into 3 larger, slightly more intelligent gelatinous masses, quivered near the sealed archway. They'd serve as distraction, nothing more. Arya, you engage their front line. Lyra, target the mages, disrupt their casting. Seraphina, stay behind cover and prioritize healing. I'll coordinate through our bond. Elias's voice held a steadiness he didn't feel. Months of ridicule at the academy had taught him one thing. Hesitation got you expelled. Or worse. Arya smirked, finally giving proper orders. Don't disappoint me, Master. Before Elias could respond, a voice echoed through the hall, amplified by magic. It was a voice he knew all too well. Kale, the academy's golden boy and his chief tormentor. Elias, I know you're in there, you pathetic smoke summoner. Kale's tone dripped with condescension. The professors detected an anomalous mana surge. Did you finally manage to summon something bigger than a wisp? Or did you just stumble upon someone else's discarded core? Elias clenched his fists. Through the core's external sensors, he could see Kale standing just beyond the sealed entrance, flanked by 11 other students in academy robes. Kale wore custom-forged battle mage armor, a luxury Elias could never afford. His blonde hair was perfectly styled even now. Ignore him, Arya said, though her knuckles were white on her sword hilt. He seeks to provoke you. Oh, I'm not ignoring him, Elias said, activating the core's communication function. His voice boomed through the hall. Kale, you brought friends to watch you fail again. Remember last year's summoning exhibition? You tried to summon an elemental and got a garden slug. A moment of silence. Then laughter from some of Kale's party members, quickly stifled. Kale's voice turned icy. Break the seals. We're going in. The containment runes flared and shattered. The massive stone doors groaned open, and light flooded the hall. Kale strode in first, his party spreading out behind him with practiced precision. Elias took them in quickly. Kale's tank was a hulking student named Brant, who had summoned a stone golem that stood nearly 3 meters tall. The mages, 2 fire, 1 ice, 1 arcane, took positions behind pillars. The healers hovered near the back, and the scouts faded into the shadows along the walls. Interesting, Kale said, his eyes scanning Elias's party. A dragon knight, an archer, and an angel? You've been busy, failure. But these are just summon monsters. They'll fade when you run out of mana. They're not monsters, Elias said, the words coming out sharper than he intended. They're my allies. Kale laughed. Allies? They're constructs. Temporary manifestations. You of all people should know that. You've never sustained a summon longer than 5 minutes. Arya stepped forward, her greatsword leaving a trail of sparks on the stone floor. You talk too much, human. Engage. Elias commanded through their bond. The battle erupted. Arya shot forward, a blur of crimson and steel. Brant's stone golem moved to intercept, but Arya pivoted at the last second, her sword carving a deep gash across its leg. The golem staggered, and Arya pressed her advantage, dragon fire gathering in her free hand. Lyra knocked 3 arrows at once, a technique they perfected during bonding sessions. She loosed them in quick succession, each aimed at a different mage. The fire mages raised barriers, but the arcane mage yelped as an arrow grazed his shoulder, disrupting his incantation. Focus fire on the archer, Kale barked. The ice mage unleashed a volley of frost shards. Lyra dove behind a pillar, but one shard caught her arm, coating it in rime. She hissed in pain. Seraphina's healing light enveloped Lyra instantly, melting the ice and closing the wound. I have you, sister, Seraphina murmured, her eyes never leaving the battlefield. Elias watched it all through the core's tactical overlay. His mind processed positions, mana levels, attack patterns. He directed the fused slimes to ooze toward the scouts, forcing them to reposition. One scout stumbled into a slime, and the acidic blob dissolved his boot, making him retreat with a cry. "You're actually coordinating them," Kale said, sounding genuinely surprised. He hadn't joined the fray yet, observing from near the entrance. "How?" "Your summoning affinity was measured at 0.3. You shouldn't be able to maintain one summon, let alone 3. Maybe your measurements were wrong." Elias shot back, even as he mentally signaled Arya to feint left. Arya obeyed, drawing the stone golem into an overcommitment. As it stumbled, she brought her sword down in a devastating overhead strike, cleaving through its shoulder. The golem crumbled into rubble. Brant paled. "My summon." "Pathetic," Arya said, kicking aside the debris. Next, Kale's expression darkened. "Enough games." He reached into his robe and withdrew a small, ornate box. It was made of dark wood inlaid with silver runes that pulsed with a sickly purple light. Elias's core immediately flashed a warning. "Alert! Divine class artifact detected. Signature matches. Bond severance construct. Origin: Temple of the Silent Gods. Effect: temporary disruption of soul links between summoner and summoned entities. ***. What is that?" Elias demanded. "A little insurance," Kale said, his smile returning. "The headmaster lent it to me when I reported your anomaly. It seems even the Academy's treasures have their uses." He opened the box. A wave of silent energy pulsed outward. It made no sound, but Elias felt it in his bones, a deep, resonant wrongness that vibrated through his connection to his summons. Arya stumbled, her sword clattering to the ground. She clutched her head. "Master? The bond, it's fading." Lyra cried out, dropping her bow. "I can't feel your guidance." Seraphina's wings faltered, and she sank to her knees, her healing light sputtering. "The connection, it's being severed." Elias tried to reach out through their bonds, but it was like shouting into a void. The mental links that had grown through days of training, conversations, and shared battles were being muffled, distorted. He could still sense his summons, but it was distant, staticky. "The artifact disrupts the soul threads that bind summoner to summoned," Kale explained, walking forward casually. "Without that connection, your allies are just autonomous constructs. And from what I've seen, they're not very bright on their own." Arya tried to lift her sword, but her movements were sluggish, uncoordinated. The dragon fire in her hand guttered and died. Brant, emboldened, charged her with a warhammer. "Arya, dodge right!" Elias shouted aloud, but the command came too late. The warhammer caught her in the side, and she was thrown against a pillar with a sickening crunch. "Arya!" Elias's heart lurched. He started toward her, but Kale intercepted him. "Oh no, you don't," Kale said, drawing his own sword, a slender, rune-etched blade that hummed with stored magic. "You're going to watch as I dismantle your little party. Then I'm taking that core back to the Academy. They'll dissect it, learn its secrets, and I'll be credited with the discovery." Elias backed away, his mind racing. The core was flashing frantic alerts, but he couldn't focus on them. Lyra was trying to shoot arrows, but they went wide. Seraphina managed a weak healing pulse toward Arya, but it barely stemmed the bleeding. Core options, Elias thought desperately. Analysis. Artifact disrupts bonds, but requires concentration from user. If Kale's focus is broken, effect may weaken. Suggestion. Direct attack on Kale. Alternative. Emergency summon to overwhelm artifact's capacity. Warning. Host's mana at 23%. Emergency summon may result in loss of consciousness. ***. Elias looked at Arya, struggling to rise. At Lyra, knocking another arrow with trembling hands. At Seraphina, her wings drooping. They weren't just summons. They were Arya, who hated admitting she cared, but had saved him 3 times already. Lyra, who blushed when he complimented her shooting. Seraphina, who sang celestial lullabies when she thought no one was listening. Kale raised his sword. "Any last words, failure?" Elias met his eyes. "You're right. They're not just constructs." He took a deep breath, reaching deep into his mana reserves, deeper than he ever had before. "They're my responsibility." He lunged, not at Kale, but toward the artifact box still hovering in the air. Kale's eyes widened, and he slashed downward, but Elias rolled under the blow, his academy robes tearing on the stone. His fingers brushed the box. Fool. It's warded, Kale snarled. A shock of purple energy jolted through Elias, but he didn't let go. He poured his remaining mana into the box, not to disable it, but to overload it through the core's interface. Mana surge detected. Artifact capacity, 98%. 99%. ***. The box trembled. The purple light intensified, then flickered. Arya gasped, her hand going to her chest. The bond, it's returning. But it was too late. Kale's sword came down again, and this time Elias couldn't dodge. The blade bit into his shoulder, and he cried out, falling to his knees. The box clattered to the floor, its light stabilizing. Nice try, Kale said, pressing the sword tip to Elias's throat. But you're still just a failure. Through the pain, Elias saw Arya stagger to her feet, her connection still flickering. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, he saw something he'd never seen before, genuine fear. Not for herself, but for him. Master, she whispered, her voice barely audible across the hall. I can't feel you. Then the bond snapped completely, and Elias was alone in his mind, with only the core's frantic alerts for company. The world narrowed to a tunnel of pain and panic. Elias lay sprawled on the cold stone floor of the dungeon entrance hall, the metallic taste of blood sharp in his mouth. Kale's mocking laughter echoed from across the chamber, where the elite academy raiders stood triumphant behind a shimmering barrier of violet light, the divine artifact, a crystalline orb pulsing with malevolent energy on a pedestal. Around him, his summons were faltering. Arya, the Tsundere Dragon Knight, knelt a few paces away, her greatsword trembling in her grip. The golden scales of her armor seemed to dull, the fiery aura that usually wreathed her flickering like a dying candle. Her crimson eyes, once fierce with defiance, were wide with confusion. Master, I can't feel you, she cried out, her voice strained. The mental link that had flowed between them, a river of shared intent and emotion, was now a dry, cracked riverbed. Elias tried to reach out, to send a pulse of reassurance, but his thoughts bounced back against an invisible wall. It was like shouting into a void. To his left, Lyra the archer staggered, her bow slipping from nerveless fingers. Her green-clad form wavered, as if she were a mirage. The connection, it's fading, she whispered, her usual cheerful demeanor shattered. Seraphina, the angelic healer, hovered nearby, her wings drooping. She clutched her staff, its soft glow sputtering. This artifact, it severs the bonds of summoning at a fundamental level, she said, her voice trembling. Without that link, we are but echoes, Master. We cannot sustain ourselves for long. The fused slimes, a hulking, gelatinous mass that had served as cannon fodder, quivered and began to dissolve into puddles of inert goo. The hall, once a chaotic battlefield of clashing steel and magical bursts, had fallen into an eerie quiet, broken only by the hum of the artifact and Kale's gloating. See, failure. Kale's voice cut through the silence. He stood tall in his polished academy armor, a smirk plastered on his face. His team, a tank with a massive shield, 2 robed mages, and a nimble rogue, flanked him, their expressions a mix of arrogance and relief. That artifact is a relic from the divine archives. It disrupts any mana-based bonds. Your little waifus are just pretty puppets without strings now. Hand over the core, and maybe we'll let you crawl back to the academy in shame. Elias's mind raced, a whirlwind of fear and desperation. His ribs ached from Kale's earlier blow, and his mana reserves were dangerously low, drained by the battle and the artifact's oppressive field. He could feel the dungeon core in his mind, a presence that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. But even its usual sarcastic commentary was subdued. Host's vital signs, critical. Bond integrity, 0%. Situation, extremely suboptimal. Would you like to purchase a continue? Just kidding, we're fresh out of credits. Not helpful. Elias thought back, gritting his teeth. He pushed himself up to his knees, ignoring the pain. The stone floor was cold and rough beneath his palms. He looked at Arya, her proud form now hunched in defeat, and felt a surge of guilt. She had protected him, fought for him, and now she was suffering because of his weakness. Lyra's trusting eyes met his, filled with a silent plea. Seraphina's gentle presence, usually so calming, was fraying at the edges. "Core," he whispered aloud, his voice hoarse. "Is there anything? Any way to break through?" The Core's voice echoed in his mind, less mocking now, almost urgent. "Analysis. Artifact is divine grade, designed to neutralize summoner-dependent entities. Direct assault is futile, your mana is too depleted, and your summons are incapacitated. However, there is a protocol for emergency scenarios. Option: perform an emergency summon. Burn all remaining mana in a single, high-risk pull. The artifact's disruption field might be momentarily overwhelmed by a surge of raw summoning energy. But warning, this will leave you completely drained. If the summon fails, you are defenseless. And given your luck, the odds of pulling something useful are statistically dismal." Elias swallowed hard. His hands trembled. Burn all his mana? It was a gamble that could kill him. But looking at his summons, Arya struggling to rise, Lyra's form flickering like a bad transmission, Seraphina's healing light guttering, he knew he had no choice. They weren't just tools. They were his companions, his friends. He had bonded with them, shared stories with Arya about her fallen kingdom, encouraged Lyra through her clumsy shots, listened to Seraphina's celestial hymns. He couldn't abandon them. "Do it," he said, his voice firming with resolve. "Initiate the emergency summon." Acknowledged. Emergency summon protocol activated. Draining host mana reserves, now. A searing pain lanced through Elias's body as his remaining mana was ripped away. He gasped, collapsing back onto the floor, his vision swimming. The world blurred at the edges. He could feel the artifact's violet field pulsing, trying to suppress the energy, but the core was channeling everything into one focused point. In front of him, the air shimmered and warped. Instead of the usual multi-orb display of a 10 roll, a single, massive summoning circle etched itself into the stone floor, glowing with a light so intense it hurt to look at. Runes spiraled outward, ancient, unfamiliar symbols that pulsed with power. Kale's smirk vanished. "What is this? Stop him," he barked. His mages began chanting, hurling bolts of arcane energy, but the spells fizzled against the summoning circle's burgeoning aura. The artifact hummed louder, its violet light intensifying, but it was like trying to hold back a tidal wave with a sieve. Elias's consciousness wavered. He clung to the image of his summons, to the bonds he had forged. "Please," he whispered, not knowing who he was pleading to. "Help them." The circle erupted, not with the flashy explosions of his previous summons, but with a silent, profound distortion of reality. Time itself seemed to stutter. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and old parchment. And then, she appeared. At first, she was just a silhouette within the light. A tall, slender figure draped in robes that seemed woven from starlight and shadow. As the glow subsided, Elias could see her clearly. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her hair a cascade of silver streaked with strands of deepest black, as if containing entire galaxies. Her eyes were pools of liquid mercury, swirling with impossible depths. In one hand, she held a staff topped with a complex, ticking clockwork mechanism that glowed with a soft, blue light. She floated a few inches above the ground, not with wings, but with an aura of temporal displacement. The air around her shimmered, and tiny, ghostly images of past and future flickered at the edges of her form. The core's voice, for once, was devoid of sarcasm. It was almost reverent. Summon successful. Entity identified, Krona. Rarity, you are ultra rare. Classification, time-manipulating sorceress. Origin, doomed timeline alpha, 7. Warning, temporal instability detected. Bonding protocols, unknown. Krona's mercury eyes swept across the scene. They lingered on Elias, on his prone form, then on the struggling summons, and finally on Kale and the artifact. Her expression was unreadable, a mask of serene detachment, but Elias could see a flicker of sorrow in those swirling depths. She spoke, her voice a melodic chime that seemed to echo from multiple directions at once. A disruption field, crude, but effective for its purpose. She raised her staff. The clockwork at its top began to spin faster, emitting a soft, ticking sound that grew louder, filling the hall. Time, For a moment, shall be mine. She pointed the staff at Kale's team. A wave of blue energy, visible like a ripple in water, expanded from her. It washed over the raiders, and they froze. Not in the sense of being paralyzed by fear, but literally frozen. Kale was caught mid-step, his mouth open in a snarl. His mages were statues, their spells half-formed in the air. The tank's shield was immobile. The rogue was a blur halted in motion. The violet light of the artifact still pulsed, but it too seemed suspended, its hum dropping to a low, drawn-out drone. The entire section of the hall around them was encased in a bubble of stopped time. Elias stared, his breath catching. The pain from his mana drain was still there, a dull throb, but it was overshadowed by awe. Krona floated over to him. Up close, he could see the fine lines of age and wisdom around her eyes, contrasting with her ageless appearance. "You are the summoner," she stated, her tone neutral. "Your bonds are severed." "A pity. They were vibrant. Can you help them?" Elias managed to croak out, pushing himself up on his elbows. "Please. They're fading." Krona glanced at Arya, Lyra, and Seraphina. Her mercury eyes narrowed slightly. "The artifact's effect is persistent. It has woven itself into the fabric of their connection to you. I cannot simply erase it. That would unravel them entirely. But I can rewind the damage. Temporarily." She gestured with her staff. The clockwork spun counterclockwise. A soft, blue light enveloped Arya first. The dragon knight gasped as color returned to her scales, her sword steadying in her grip. The flickering aura around her reignited, though it was weaker than before. "Master," she whispered, her voice tinged with relief and confusion. Next, Lyra's form solidified. She blinked, picking up her bow with renewed strength. I can feel the link again. It's faint, but it's there." Seraphina's wings lifted, her staff glowing steadily once more. "The healing channels are restored, for now." "Thank you, strange one." Elias felt it too, a fragile thread reconnecting him to each of them. It was thin, strained, like a wire about to snap, but it was there. He could sense their presence in his mind again, a whisper compared to the shout it had been. "Thank you," he breathed, looking up at Krona. She nodded, her expression still detached. "Do not thank me yet. This is a stopgap. The artifact's core programming remains active. I have merely paused its local effects and reversed the immediate decay. The bonds are unstable. They will hold for a short time, perhaps minutes, perhaps less. And my temporal hold on your enemies will not last. Time, once stopped, always seeks to resume its flow." As if on cue, the frozen bubble around Kale's team began to shimmer. Tiny cracks appeared in the stillness. Kale's finger twitched. "We need to destroy that artifact," Arya said, her voice tight. She hefted her sword, but Elias could see the strain in her movements. The restored bond was fragile. Commanding her in battle might break it entirely. "The artifact is divine-made," Krona said, her gaze fixed on the crystalline orb. "Its construction is beyond mere physical destruction. It is tied to a caster, a being of significant power who activated it. That caster is now aware of the temporal interference." They approach. Elias's blood ran cold. "A caster? Who?" Krona's mercury eyes met his. For the first time, he saw a flicker of something like urgency in their depths. "An envoy, a servant of the gods. This artifact is not a mere tool, it is a declaration. Its activation was a message, and by countering it, even temporarily, we have drawn a response. The envoy comes to assess, to judge, perhaps to reclaim." She floated closer, her temporal aura making the air around her waver. "Listen, summoner. My timeline was doomed because we played with forces we did not understand. We sought to control time, to avert catastrophes, and in doing so, we unraveled reality itself. I am here because your summoning pulled me from the moment before the end. I have seen what happens when power is wielded without wisdom. This gacha core of yours, it is a similar force. A gamble with existence. The gods watch such things closely." Elias struggled to process it all. The pain, the fragile bonds, the frozen enemies, and now this. A warning from a sorceress who had seen worlds end. "What do we do?" "For now, we survive," Krona said. She looked toward the dungeon entrance, where the main doors were still sealed by Kale's earlier magic, but a new presence was making itself felt, a pressure in the air, a scent of ozone and incense. The envoy is near. Your bonds are weakened, your mana is depleted, and your enemies are about to unfreeze. You must choose, fight, flee, or parley. But know this, the artifact's effect lingers. Even if we break it, its echo will haunt your connections until the caster is dealt with. Arya stepped forward, her sword held ready. We fight. Master, give the order. We will protect you. Lyra knocked an arrow, her hands steady. I'm with Arya. We can't let them take the core. Seraphina hovered closer, her healing light bathing Elias, soothing his ache slightly. I will sustain us as long as I can. Elias looked at them, his summons, his friends, their loyalty shining through even the fragile bonds. He looked at Krona, her timeless gaze holding a warning of greater dangers. And he looked at Kale, whose form was now visibly straining against the temporal hold, the cracks in the bubble spreading. He took a deep breath, forcing his mind to focus. The core's interface flickered in his vision, showing the tenuous bond lines and his near-zero mana. Core, status on the artifact? Any weaknesses? The core's voice was quiet. Scanning, artifact is shielded by divine energy. Direct attack likely ineffective. However, its power source is external. It draws from the caster's link. Disrupt that link, and the artifact may deactivate. But to do that, you would need to confront the caster directly. And given current bond instability, prolonged combat is not advised. Krona's staff ticked louder. The hold breaks. They will be free in moments. And the envoy, they are at the threshold. Elias made his decision. He pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly but standing tall. Arya, Lyra, Seraphina, defensive formation around Krona and me. We're not attacking yet. Krona, can you slow time for us? Give us a moment to think when they unfreeze. Krona nodded. A localized temporal dilation. It will strain my power, but it is possible. Do it. Core, keep scanning for that caster link. We need to find a way to break it. As he spoke, the frozen bubble shattered with a sound like breaking glass. Time resumed. Kale stumbled forward, his expression one of rage and confusion. His team shook off the temporal stasis, disoriented but quickly regrouping. What did you do, failure? Kale snarled, raising his sword. The artifact's violet light flared anew, and Elias felt the fragile bonds with his summons tremble. Arya gritted her teeth, a sheen of sweat on her brow. But before Kale could charge, the air at the far end of the hall rippled. A figure stepped through, not from the sealed doors, but from nowhere, as if space itself had folded. It was tall, clad in robes of pure white edged with gold, and its face was hidden behind a featureless silver mask. In one hand, it held a staff similar to the artifact, but glowing with a serene, white light. An aura of absolute authority radiated from it, pressing down on the hall like a physical weight. Krona's whisper was barely audible, filled with a dread that seemed to chill the very air. The envoy is here. The figure's masked face turned toward Elias. A voice, genderless and echoing with divine power, spoke, shaking the stones beneath their feet. Interloper, you have tampered with ordained fate. The artifact's disruption was a test. You have answered with temporal heresy. Explain yourself, or be erased. Elias's heart hammered against his ribs. The bonds with his summons felt like threads of glass. Kale and his team watched, momentarily forgotten in the presence of this new, overwhelming power. Krona's staff ticked a frantic rhythm, her mercury eyes fixed on the envoy. And in that moment, Elias knew the battle had just escalated beyond anything he had imagined. The cliffhanger hung in the air, thick with tension. They were no longer just fighting Academy raiders. They were facing a servant of the gods, with their bonds weakened and time itself as their only ally. The masked envoy stood in the dungeon's entrance hall, its form shimmering with an otherworldly light that made the stone walls seem insubstantial. Kale's retreating footsteps echoed down the corridor, his team dragging their wounded leader away, but the artifact he'd left behind pulsed with a malevolent violet glow. It was a crystalline obelisk about waist-high, covered in divine runes that seemed to writhe like living things. Elias felt the drain immediately, a cold suction at the core of his being, as if his very soul were being siphoned through a straw. He staggered, one hand going to his chest where the dungeon core's bond hummed in distress. Arya caught his arm, her dragon-scale gauntlets warm against his skin. "Master," she said, her usual tsundere edge replaced by genuine concern. Your mana, it's fading fast. Lyra knocked an arrow, aiming at the artifact, but Krona raised a hand. Don't, the Time Sorceress warned, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. That's a divine siphon. Physical attacks will only accelerate the drain. It's designed to punish those who meddle with temporal powers. She floated forward, her robes of starlight and shadow billowing without wind. Krona was unlike any summon Elias had seen. Her form seemed to exist in multiple moments simultaneously, her eyes holding the ghost light of dead stars. She placed her hands on the artifact, and time around it slowed to a crawl. The violet pulses became languid, stretching out like taffy. This will buy us minutes, not hours, Krona said, her voice strained. The siphon is connected to a divine source. It will keep draining you until either you're empty or it's destroyed by someone with equal authority. Seraphina moved to Elias's side, her angelic wings glowing with healing light. She placed a hand on his forehead, and warmth spread through him, fighting back the cold drain. I can mitigate the symptoms, Master, but not the cause. Your mana reserves are dropping by 1% every 30 seconds, even with Krona's intervention. Elias's mind raced. He could feel the numbers ticking down through his bond with the dungeon core, a percentage counter that had started at 100% and was now at 94% and falling. At this rate, he'd be completely drained in under an hour. And without mana, he couldn't summon, couldn't maintain bonds, couldn't even keep the dungeon's basic functions running. Core, he said aloud, his voice tight. Options. Now. The familiar sarcastic voice echoed in his mind, but for once, it sounded almost solemn. Analyzing divine siphon artifact. Origin, celestial forge of the god of order. Purpose, punishment for temporal violations. Current drain rate, 0.033% per second. Krona's temporal dilation reducing to 0.02% per second. Congratulations, Master. You've upgraded from quick death to slow, agonizing death. Want to roll for a solution? I hear the pity system kicks in after you're dead. Not helpful, Elias snapped, then immediately regretted it as the effort cost him another fraction of percent. He took a deep breath, forcing calm. What do we know about its creator? You mentioned something about your origin earlier. The core's interface materialized before him, a glowing screen only he could see. On it, text scrolled. Accessing restricted memories. Clearance, bonded user. Warning, divine knowledge may cause cognitive strain. Then images flooded his mind. He saw a god falling from a celestial throne, not in defeat, but in purposeful descent. This god, the fallen one, had watched as other deities played with mortal lives like pieces on a board. They granted power arbitrarily, cursed without reason, elevated, and destroyed on whims. And the fallen one had grown disillusioned. So I created you, Elias whispered, understanding dawning. Not as a weapon, as a test. Bingo, the core said, its voice losing some of its sarcastic edge. The fallen god, call him Prometheus if you want something pronounceable, crafted me from the essence of chance and choice. He embedded gacha mechanics not as a game, but as a philosophical experiment. Could mortals handle power that came randomly? Would they cherish what they received, or discard the trash pulls? Would bonds formed through care overcome the tyranny of rarity tiers? Aria's grip on his arm tightened. That explains why you're so different, she said, looking at the core's physical manifestation, a floating orb of light near Elias's shoulder. Other dungeon cores just spawn mindless monsters. You create beings with histories, personalities, souls. And that's why the other gods are interested, Krona added, her hands still pressed against the slowing artifact. Sweat beaded on her forehead, a surprising show of exertion for a UR rank entity. In my timeline, gacha mechanics were perverted into a system of control. A god used them to create an army of enslaved summons, stripping away their will. Your success here proves there's another way. That makes you dangerous to the established order. Elias's mana hit 87%. The drain was accelerating slightly despite Krona's efforts. We need to break this thing, Lyra said, her archer's eyes scanning the artifact for weaknesses. If it's divine made, maybe divine can break it. We don't have anything divine, Seraphina pointed out gently. I'm an angel, yes, but of a lower celestial order. This artifact bears the mark of a high god. Then we make something divine, Elias said, an idea forming. Core, what if we use the bonding energy? The connections between me and the summons. You've said before that our bonds generate a unique type of mana. The core pulsed with interest. Analyzing. Bond mana does carry traces of soul essence, which has quasi-divine properties when concentrated, but you'd need an immense amount, and focusing it would require. The core trailed off, then continued with what sounded like reluctant admiration. You'd need all your summons to channel their bond energy simultaneously into a single point. It would leave them weakened, and if it fails, you'll accelerate the drain. We're running out of options, Elias said, looking at each of his summons. Arya met his gaze first. I trust you, Master. Even if this is reckless. The admission surprised him, and her too, judging by the faint blush that colored her cheeks. Lyra nodded. My bow is yours. Seraphina smiled beatifically. Where you lead, I follow. Korna maintained her position at the artifact. I'll keep slowing time around the siphon. The rest of you will need to act quickly. Once you begin the channeling, I won't be able to maintain both efforts. Then let's do it, Elias said. Core, guide us through this. For the next 10 minutes, they prepared. The core projected diagrams into their minds, showing how to form a pentagram around the artifact with Elias at the center. Each summon would stand at a point, channeling their bond energy through him, and he would focus it all into a single strike against the divine siphon. As they took their positions, Elias felt the bonds thrumming between them, not just his individual connections to each summon, but the web of relationships they'd built among themselves. Arya's protective instinct toward Lyra, who looked up to the Dragon Knight. Seraphina's gentle care for all of them. Even Krona, the newcomer, was being woven into the tapestry. Begin on my mark, Elias said, his voice steady despite the mana now reading 72%. 3, 2, 1. Now, light erupted from each summon. From Arya, crimson energy swirled, the essence of dragon fire and knightly honor. From Lyra, emerald strands, the focus of the hunt and the joy of purpose found. From Seraphina, golden radiance, healing light, and celestial compassion. From Krona, who maintained her position while still contributing, violet temporal energy, the memory of lost timelines and second chances. And from Elias himself, a blue-white core of willpower, the determination of a boy who'd been called failure but refused to break. The energies met in the air above the artifact, twisting together into a brilliant, chaotic rainbow. Elias raised his hands, directing the coalescing power. He could feel each summon's essence, their memories, their hopes. Arya's longing for redemption. Lyra's search for belonging. Seraphina's desire to protect life. Krona's regret over a timeline she couldn't save. And his own. The years of ridicule. The desperation in the forgotten crypt. The shock of bonding with a sarcastic core. The growing affection for these beings who'd chosen to stand with him. Focus, the core shouted in his mind. The energy is destabilizing. You need to. But Elias wasn't listening to the core anymore. He was listening to the bonds themselves. Instead of forcing the energies together, he let them find their own harmony. The different colored strands began to weave themselves, not into a single color, but into a pattern that celebrated their differences while uniting their purpose. The resulting beam that lanced down toward the divine siphon was like nothing Elias had ever seen. A living tapestry of light that sang with multiple voices in perfect chord. It struck the artifact. For a moment, nothing happened. Then cracks appeared in the crystalline surface, spreading like spiderwebs. The violet glow intensified, fighting back, but the bond energy pushed through. The runes on the artifact's surface flared once, twice, then went dark. With a sound like shattering glass, the divine siphon exploded into harmless dust. The drain stopped instantly. Elias's mana counter froze at 68%. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Krona collapsed, her temporal dilation ending. Seraphina rushed to her side, healing light already flowing. Arya kept her sword drawn, scanning the area for new threats. Lyra lowered her bow, breathing heavily. We did it, Elias whispered. You did, the core said, its voice uncharacteristically soft. That was statistically improbable. The bond energy shouldn't have been pure enough to counter divine craftsmanship. Unless The core paused. Unless the bonds themselves have begun evolving into something beyond their component parts. Before Elias could ask what that meant, a new voice echoed through the chamber. It came not from any physical source, but from everywhere and nowhere at once. A presence that filled the space without occupying it. Prove your worth, summoner, or be erased. The words vibrated in Elias's bones, in his teeth, in the very air he breathed. They carried the weight of judgment, of cosmic scales being balanced. Arya moved in front of him, sword raised. Who's there? No visible entity appeared, but the pressure increased. Elias felt as though he were standing at the bottom of an ocean, with unimaginable weight pressing down from above. The attention you've drawn, Krona said weakly from where she lay, supported by Seraphina. That's not an envoy. That's direct interest. The core's interface flashed urgently. Incoming divine communication. Source, multiple celestial entities. Nature, test/threat. Recommendation, strengthen dungeon defenses immediately. Time until next contact. Estimated 24 to 48 hours. ***. They're giving us a deadline, Elias said, the realization cold in his gut. More like an ultimatum, the core corrected. Prove you're worthy of wielding gacha power responsibly, or they'll remove you from the board entirely. And removal in divine terms tends to be permanent. Elias looked around at his summons, exhausted, weakened from channeling their bond energy, but still standing with him. Arya met his gaze, and in her eyes he saw not fear, but fierce determination. Lyra nodded once, her expression serious. Seraphina helped Krona to her feet, both of them ready for whatever came next. Then we prove it, Elias said, his voice gaining strength. Core, what's the fastest way to strengthen our position? The sarcasm returned to the core's voice, but it sounded almost affectionate now. Oh, the usual. More summons, better bonds, dungeon expansions, maybe a few strategic traps. But we're going to need resources, and with your mana at 68% and the summons depleted. The core trailed off meaningfully. Elias understood. They needed to recover, and quickly. But more than that, they needed to understand exactly what proving their worth would entail. As they moved deeper into the dungeon, toward the heart chamber where they could rest and plan, Elias couldn't shake the feeling of eyes upon him. Ancient, powerful eyes that watched from beyond the world, waiting to see if he would rise to divinity's challenge or crumble beneath its gaze. The clock was ticking, and somewhere in the celestial realms, gods were placing their bets on the outcome. The silence after the divine ultimatum was heavier than any dungeon stone. Elias stood in the heart chamber, the dungeon core pulsing with a soft blue light that did little to dispel the chill in his bones. 24 to 48 hours. The words echoed in his mind like a death knell. Around him, his summons gathered. Arya leaning against her greatsword with her usual tsundere scowl, Lyra nervously adjusting her bowstring, Seraphina humming a celestial hymn, and Krona observing the flow of time with detached curiosity. Well, master, the core's sarcastic voice crackled through the chamber. Divine attention. How prestigious. I'd suggest panicking, but that won't improve your gacha rates. Elias ignored the jab, his hands trembling slightly. He could still feel the phantom drain of the divine siphon artifact, like a wound in his mana channels. We need to get stronger. Fast. Arya pushed off from her sword, the metal scraping against stone, stating the obvious. But how? More summons? You're barely standing after that last ritual. She was right. Elias's body ached, his mana reserves dangerously low. But the core had hinted at another path during their earlier struggles. Bonding, he said, the word feeling foreign yet inevitable. The core said our connections could unlock hidden power. We've fought together, but we haven't really talked. Lyra perked up, her ears twitching, a remnant of her elven heritage from whatever world she'd been pulled from. Talk. About what? Everything, Elias said, meeting each of their eyes. Why you're here. What you want. Who you were before the gacha. Arya's expression tightened, but she didn't object. Seraphina floated closer, her angelic wings shedding soft light. The bonds of heart are stronger than any summoning circle, master. But they require vulnerability. Krona materialized a small hourglass, watching the sand fall. Time is limited. I suggest we begin. They gathered in what had become their makeshift living quarters. A side chamber Elias had expanded using the core's basic terraforming functions. Crude stone benches surrounded a central fire pit, where magical flames flickered without fuel. The air smelled of ozone and damp earth. Elias sat opposite Arya, the firelight casting shadows across her armored form. "You first," he said softly. "You've fought beside me since the beginning. But I don't know anything about you beyond the sword and the attitude." Arya stared into the flames, her fingers tracing the dragon emblem on her pauldron. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of worlds, she began. "I was a knight of the Draconic Sanctum. Not just any knight, the youngest to ever earn the title of Dragonblade." Her voice was flat, devoid of its usual sharpness. "I was proud, arrogant, thought I could protect everyone." She paused, and Elias saw genuine pain in her eyes, a crack in her tsundere armor. "There was a siege, a demonic incursion from the lower planes. I led the defense. My orders were to hold the eastern gate at all costs." A bitter laugh escaped her. "I held it, but the western gate fell because I refused to redeploy troops, convinced my position was the key. Hundreds died. Civilians. Children." Lyra gasped softly. Seraphina's healing glow intensified, as if trying to soothe a wound no light could reach. "My commander stripped me of my rank," Arya continued, her knuckles white where she gripped her knees. "Said I valued glory over lives. I wandered after that, a fallen knight with no purpose. Then the Gacha pulled me here." She finally looked at Elias. "You call me an SSR, a legendary summon, but I'm just a failure trying to redeem myself." Elias's chest tightened. He'd seen Arya as powerful, almost untouchable. But this was human. "You're not a failure," he said, the words clumsy but earnest. "You've saved my life half a dozen times. You protect everyone here without hesitation. That's not failure. That's redemption in action." Arya's eyes widened slightly. Then, she snorted, the familiar tsundere mask sliding back into place. "Don't get sentimental, Master. I just don't want to die in a stupid dungeon." But her hand reached out, almost involuntarily, and patted his shoulder, a brief, awkward gesture. As she did, her armor shimmered, the dragon emblem glowing brighter. The core's voice echoed in their minds. Asterisk bond level increased. Arya, SSR. Ultimate ability unlocked. Dragon Ascendance. Temporary transformation into full draconic form. Asterisk. Arya stared at her hands, where scales briefly flickered across her skin. "Huh, so that's how it works." Lyra went next, her story quieter but no less poignant. She'd been a hunter in a forest realm, skilled but directionless, watching her village stagnate while she achieved nothing of note. "I wanted to matter," she whispered, her bow across her lap, "to protect something bigger than myself. When you summoned me, Master, I thought, maybe this is it." Elias remembered her early clumsiness, how she'd improved through his encouragement. "You do matter, Lyra. Your arrows have turned battles. You're not just a summon. You're our sharpshooter, our lookout, our friend." Lyra's ears twitched happily, and as she smiled, her bow glowed with a soft green light. Asterisk bond level increased. Lyra, R. Ultimate ability unlocked. Forest Wrath. Rapid multi-shot barrage with homing arrows. Asterisk. Seraphina shared celestial secrets, whispers of the divine hierarchies, how some gods viewed mortals as pawns in eternal games. "The one who spoke the ultimatum is likely a mid-tier deity, testing your resolve," she said, her voice like chimes. "But my world fell because higher powers grew bored. I became a healer to mend what they broke." Her bond unlock was subtler, a halo of light that enhanced all healing within its radius. Krona, ever enigmatic, spoke of a timeline where she'd failed to prevent a cataclysm. "I manipulate time, but I cannot change hearts. Your bonds, Master, they are a variable I did not calculate." Her ultimate ability allowed brief, localized time stops. As each bond deepened, Elias felt a strange warmth in his chest, a network of connections strengthening not just his summons, but himself. His mana reserves, still low, felt more resilient, as if drawing from their collective will. "Right," he said, standing. "Now we need more defenders. Core, initiate a 10 roll." The core's interface materialized in the air, the familiar gacha wheel spinning with garish colors. Mana levels critical, Master. This will hurt. But hey, no pain, no SSR. Elias channeled his remaining mana, gritting his teeth as the drain hit him like a physical blow. The wheel spun, orbs popping out one by one. The results were mixed. 7 R-rank entities, 3 more archers similar to Lyra, 2 shield-bearing golems, and a pair of fire mages with limited spellbooks. 2 N-rank slimes plopped out, immediately starting to clean the floor with gelatinous enthusiasm. But the 10th orb glowed with a steady silver light, not the gold of an SSR, but something more refined. It resolved into a tall, slender figure in scholar's robes, holding a crystal tablet. His eyes were sharp, calculating. SSR rank strategist, Vega, at your service, he said, bowing slightly. I analyze probabilities, optimize resources, and plan expansions. Also, I play a mean game of chess. Elias slumped against the wall, drained but smiling. Welcome, Vega. We need defenses. And fast. Over the next several hours, the dungeon transformed under Vega's direction. Using the core's terraforming, they expanded the entrance hall into a kill zone with elevated platforms for archers and choke points for Arya to hold. The R-rank golems were positioned as movable barricades, while the fire mages set up overlapping fields of magical flame. Vega's crystal tablet displayed real-time mana flows and structural weak points. Your bonding has increased overall efficiency by 37%, Vega noted, tapping his tablet. But we face multiple threats. The core is detecting alliance signals from 3 nearby rival cores. They're coordinating. And the academy. He pulled up a scrying image, a column of students and professors marching toward the dungeon, led by a determined-looking Kale with a fresh, nastier-looking artifact. They're bringing siege equipment. And something else. The image zoomed in on the rear of the column, where a shrouded figure moved with unnatural grace. It was tall, slender, with too many joints in its limbs, and its face was a smooth blank oval. That, Vega said, is not human. Energy signature matches corrupted dungeon core emanations. A chill ran down Elias's spine. The inhuman entity from the divine warning? Suddenly, one of the newly summoned R-rank archers, a young woman with hawk-like eyes, burst into the chamber. Master, scouts report from the surface. An army approaches, hundreds of raiders from the academy, reinforced by mercenaries. And that thing is with them. It's scanning the dungeon like it's looking for something. Vega's expression turned grim. They'll be here within the hour. Our defenses are good, but against those numbers and an unknown entity. He looked at Elias. We need a plan beyond walls and arrows. Elias met the eyes of his summons. Arya with her newfound resolve, Lyra standing tall, Seraphina glowing with protective light, Krona monitoring timelines, and Vega with his strategies. The bonds between them hummed with potential. Then we give them more than they expect, Elias said, his voice steady for the first time since the ultimatum. We fight as one, not just master and summons, but a family. Arya smirked, her hand resting on her sword. Cheesy, Master, but I'll allow it. It was then that Vega's tablet flashed red. He stared at it, his calm demeanor cracking for the first time. Master, new detection. The inhuman entity, it's not just with them. It's communicating with the rival cores, coordinating the assault. He looked up, his face pale. They're not just attacking. They're converging. All forces will hit us simultaneously in approximately 45 minutes. He zoomed the scrying image out, showing 3 other blips moving toward their position from different directions, the rival core's monster hordes. And in the center, the Academy army with the blank-faced entity at its heart. We're surrounded, Vega said quietly. Then, his voice hardened with strategic clarity. But every siege has a weak point. That entity, it's the linchpin. If we can take it out. It won't be easy, Krona interrupted, her hourglass spinning rapidly. I'm detecting temporal distortions around it. It exists partially outside normal time. Seraphina's wings fluttered anxiously. Its energy feels hungry, like it consumes rather than creates. Elias's mind raced. The divine ultimatum, the converging enemies, the mysterious entity, it was all connected. The core's voice, unusually serious, echoed in the silence. Master, this is the test. Survive this, and you prove your worth. Fail, and, well, Let's not dwell on failure. He took a deep breath, the bonds with his summons glowing softly around him like ethereal threads. Then we don't fail. Vega, give me options. Everyone else, prepare for battle. This isn't just about defending a dungeon anymore. He looked toward the entrance, where the first sounds of marching feet could now be faintly heard through the stone. This is about proving that bonds are stronger than any gacha luck. And as he spoke, the blank-faced entity on the scrying image turned its smooth head, as if looking directly at him through the magic, and raised one too long finger toward the dungeon. The air in the dungeon's central chamber grew thick with tension, heavy with the scent of damp stone and ozone. Elias stood before the glowing orb of the dungeon core, its surface pulsing with faint blue light as streams of data, summoning rates, bond levels, mana reserves, scrolled across his mental interface. Around him, his summons gathered. Arya, her dragon-scale armor gleaming in the core's light, one hand resting on the hilt of her greatsword. Lyra, fingers nervously tracing the curve of her bow. Seraphina, wings folded gently, her expression serene yet alert. Krona, her hourglass pendant spinning slowly, casting distorted shadows. And Vega, the new strategist, poring over a holographic map that floated between them. Scouts confirm it, Master, Vega said, her voice crisp and analytical. She adjusted her glasses, a pair of thin, silver frames that seemed to absorb the light. 3 rival dungeon cores have allied: the Blightfang Warrens, the Shardspire Depths, and the Whispering Catacombs. Their combined forces number in the hundreds: goblin swarms, stone trolls, shadow stalkers, and worse. They'll be here within the hour. Elias felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Just weeks ago, he'd been the Academy's worst summoner, mocked for conjuring wisps of smoke. Now, he was defending a sentient core against an army. He glanced at Arya, who met his gaze with a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Her tsundere demeanor had softened since their bonding talks, but the fire in her eyes burned brighter than ever. "We'll hold them," she said, her voice firm. "I didn't come back from oblivion to lose to some overgrown pebbles." The core chimed in, its sarcastic tone cutting through the tension. "Oh joy, a party. Don't forget to bring snacks, because this is going to be a long, bloody slog. Mana levels at 78%, enough for a few emergency pulls, but I'd save them for when things get really dicey." Which they will. Obviously. Elias ignored the jab, focusing on Vega's map. "What's our plan?" Vega pointed to the dungeon's entrance hall, a vast cavern with narrow choke points. "We use the terrain. Lyra, position your archers, the R-ranks from the last summon, on the upper ledges here and here. They'll provide covering fire. Seraphina, set up a healing station in the rear chamber. Krona, you're on temporal support. Slow their advance. Rewind minor injuries. Arya, you and the fused slimes hold the front line." "Fused slimes?" Elias asked, raising an eyebrow. "The N-rank trash from your early pulls," the core explained. "I merged them into a few larger, semi-sentient blobs. They're not smart, but they're sticky and acidic. Perfect for traps." As if on cue, a group of gelatinous, greenish blobs oozed into the chamber, quivering with eager anticipation. Elias couldn't help but smile. Even his weakest summons had a role to play. He reached out mentally, feeling the faint bonds with each entity. Arya's was a steady, warm pulse. Lyra's, a flicker of determination. Seraphina's, a soothing hum. Krona's, a complex weave of time threads. And Vega's, a sharp, logical grid. Together, they were more than just summons. They were his team. "Let's move," Elias said, his voice gaining strength. "We've trained for this." The first wave hit like a thunderclap. Goblins, hundreds of them, poured into the entrance hall, screeching and brandishing crude spears. They moved in a chaotic swarm, but Vega's planning paid off. Lyra's archers loosed volleys of arrows, thinning the ranks before they reached the choke points. Arya stood at the forefront, her greatsword a blur of motion. With each swing, dragon fire erupted from the blade, incinerating clusters of goblins in bursts of ash and ember. "Is that all you've got?" she taunted, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "I've faced drakes with more bite." Elias watched from a raised platform, his heart pounding. He channeled mana through the core's interface, reinforcing bonds and issuing subtle commands. When a group of goblins tried to flank Arya, he directed the fused slimes. They oozed from crevices, engulfing the creatures in corrosive gel. The goblins' screams were cut short as they dissolved. "Nice one, Master," Lyra called down, notching another arrow. Her multi-shot ability had unlocked during their bonding sessions. Now, she fired 3 arrows at once, each finding a different target. They're falling back, but the respite was brief. The second wave emerged, stone trolls, hulking brutes with skin like granite. They lumbered forward, shrugging off arrows and slime traps. Arya's dragon fire scorched their hides, but they kept coming, fists slamming into the ground with earth-shaking force. "Seraphina, we need buffs," Elias shouted. The angel raised her hands, a soft golden light radiating from her palms. It washed over Arya and the slimes, strengthening their defenses and accelerating their movements. Arya roared, her form shimmering, then expanding. Scales erupted across her skin, wings of molten gold burst from her back, and her sword grew to match her new size. She had unleashed her dragon form, a towering beast of myth and fury. "Now we're talking," the core quipped. SSR Ultimate Ability, Draconic Ascension. Duration, 5 minutes. "Try not to burn down the dungeon, please. I just redecorated." Arya swept through the trolls, her claws tearing through stone like paper. Lyra's arrows found weak points in their joints, and Krona used her time magic to freeze them momentarily, leaving them vulnerable. Within minutes, the trolls lay in shattered piles. Elias allowed himself a breath of relief, but Vega's voice crackled over their mental link. "Master, something's wrong. The third wave, it's not monsters. It's nothing." He looked to the entrance. A darkness seeped in, not shadow but void, a swirling, silent emptiness that devoured light and sound. From it emerged a figure, a corrupted dungeon core, floating like a twisted parody of Elias's own. It was jagged and black, with cracks of violet energy spiderwebbing across its surface. Around it, the air grew cold, and the bonds in Elias's mind flickered, weakened. "What is that?" Lyra whispered, her bow trembling. "An inhuman entity," Vega said, her voice tight. "Scans indicate it's a rogue core, corrupted by void energy. It's emitting a field that negates summoning bonds. It's after our Gacha data." The corrupted core spoke, its voice a grating static that clawed at Elias's ears. "Gacha system detected. Rarity, SSR, SR, R, N, data extraction initiated. Your summons will be mine." It unleashed a pulse of void energy. Elias gasped as the bonds with his summons wavered. Arya's dragon form flickered, Lyra's arrows faltered, Seraphina's light dimmed. The fused slimes dissolved into puddles of inert goo. Panic surged in Elias's chest, but he forced it down, clinging to the memories of their bonding talks. Arya's redemption, Lyra's purpose, Seraphina's secrets, Krona's regrets. Those weren't just data, they were connections. "Fight it," he yelled, pouring his own mana into the bonds. "Remember why you're here." Arya shook off the effects first, her dragon form stabilizing. "Not today, you scrap heap." She charged, but the corrupted core was faster. It extended tendrils of void energy, wrapping around her limbs. She struggled, dragon fire sputtering against the darkness. "Your SSR will make a fine addition to my collection," the core hissed, pulling her closer. Elias's mind raced. The core's interface flashed warnings. Bond integrity critical. Mana at 45%. Suggest emergency pull. But a summon might be negated too. Instead, he focused on Arya, on the late-night talks where she'd confessed her fear of failing again, on the way she'd slowly started calling him Master without sarcasm. He channeled all that care, all that bond, into a single, desperate command. "Arya, break free." His mana surged, a golden light erupting from his hands and flowing into her. For a moment, the void energy recoiled. Arya roared, unleashing a blast of pure dragon fire that shattered the tendrils. She fell back, panting, her form shrinking back to humanoid size. "Thanks, Master," she muttered, wiping ash from her face. "Now let's crush this thing." But the corrupted core wasn't done. It hovered higher, void energy coalescing into a massive spear aimed at Elias. Primary target, Summoner. Eliminate to claim core. Lyra fired a barrage of arrows, but they disintegrated in the void field. Seraphina's healing light couldn't penetrate it. Krona tried to rewind time, but the core's energy resisted, fraying the temporal threads. Vega's strategies flashed through Elias's mind. None accounted for this. Core, what do I do? Elias thought desperately. The core's voice was uncharacteristically grim. It's feeding on gacha data, the very essence of our system. You need to overload it. Use a high-rarity summon, but bond it instantly. If it's strong enough, it might disrupt the field. Mana's too low for a 10 roll. Then pray for a lucky single pull. Mana at 40%, just enough for one shot. And Elias, make it count. Elias closed his eyes, blocking out the chaos. He reached into the core's summoning interface, feeling the familiar rush of probability, the gamble that had defined his new life. He pictured Aria's loyalty, Lyra's growth, Seraphina's grace, Krona's wisdom, Vega's cunning. This wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that bonds mattered more than luck. Single summon. Initiate, he whispered. Mana drained from him, leaving him lightheaded. A summoning circle glowed at his feet, spinning with colors, blue, silver, gold. The corrupted core lunged, void spear hurling toward him. Time seemed to slow. Elias saw Arya diving to intercept, Lyra screaming his name, Seraphina's wings outstretched in protection. Then, the circle erupted in a blinding, platinum light. A figure stepped out, tall, armored in crystalline plates, with eyes that glowed like stars. The void spear shattered against an invisible barrier. The new summon spoke, her voice resonating with power. I am Astra, SSR plus Star Warden. Your void ends here. Elias didn't hesitate. He poured every ounce of his remaining bond, all the care, trust, and shared struggles, into Astra. The connection snapped into place, strong and clear. Astra raised a hand, and constellations swirled around her, piercing the void field with beams of pure starlight. The corrupted core shrieked, its form cracking. Data corruption. Impossible. Now Arya. Elias shouted. Arya leaped, her greatsword blazing with renewed dragon fire. She drove it deep into the core's center. Violet energy exploded outward, then dissipated, leaving only a fading echo. The void field vanished, and the bonds in Elias's mind flared back to full strength. Silence fell, broken only by heavy breathing. The remaining monster hordes, leaderless, retreated into the darkness. Elias slumped against the wall, exhaustion washing over him. Astra helped him up, her touch cool and steady. Well, that was dramatic, the core said, its sarcasm returning. SSR plus pull on a single try? Someone's luck is finally turning. But don't get cocky, we've got bigger problems. Scans show the Academy's force, led by Kale, is almost here. And they've brought something worse. Elias looked at his summons. Arya, nursing a burn on her arm. Lyra, bowstring snapped. Seraphina, wings drooping with fatigue. Krona, hourglass cracked. Vega, map flickering. And now Astra, standing vigilant. They were battered, but unbroken. We rest for now, he said, his voice hoarse. Then we face whatever comes next. As they tended to wounds, Elias couldn't shake the image of the corrupted core grabbing Arya. That thing had wanted his summons, not just to destroy, but to collect. What other horrors were out there, coveting his gacha power? The core's final warning echoed in his mind. Bigger problems. For the first time, Elias wondered if luck alone would be enough. The corrupted core's void tendril tightened around Arya's armored waist, its dark energy sizzling against her dragon-scale pauldrons. She struggled, her greatsword clattering to the dungeon floor as the tendril lifted her toward the pulsating, obsidian mass of the enemy core. Your SSR will make a fine addition to my collection, the core's distorted voice echoed, a cacophony of stolen whispers. Elias's heart hammered against his ribs. Around him, the battle raged. Lyra's arrows peppered the remaining stone trolls. Seraphina's healing light flickered as she tended to wounded slimes, and Vega shouted orders from a makeshift barricade. But all Elias saw was Arya, her crimson eyes wide with pain and defiance, her fingers straining toward him. Master, she gasped, the word barely audible over the roar of void energy. Elias's mind raced. The core's interface flashed warnings in his vision. Bonding link. Arya, SSR. Critical strain. Void interference detected. Mana reserves, 12%. He'd burned through most of his mana summoning Astra, the Star Warden who now hovered beside him, her celestial robes shimmering with starlight. Astra had disrupted the void field, but the corrupted core's grip on Arya remained. I can't break it directly, Astra said, her voice like chiming bells. The void has anchored to her essence. It requires something purer. Purer. The word echoed in Elias's mind. He remembered the core's mocking lessons. Bonding wasn't just about commands or training. It was about connection. Care. The late-night talks with Arya about her fallen kingdom. The way Lyra's aim improved when he praised her. Seraphina's gentle smile when he listened to her stories of the heavens. His hands trembled. He was the Academy's worst summoner, a failure who'd only ever produced smoke. But here, in this dungeon, he'd built something real. Krona, Elias shouted, turning to the time sorceress. She stood a few paces away, her hourglass staff glowing with faint, golden light. Can you rewind? Just a few seconds. Give me an edge. Krona's violet eyes narrowed. Time manipulation is delicate, Master. In this void-saturated area, it could backfire. But for Arya, she raised her staff, the sands within beginning to flow backward. 3 seconds. Use them well. The world blurred. Elias felt a lurch in his stomach as the scene rewound. Arya's lifted form sank slightly, the tendril's grip loosened by a fraction. It was enough. Elias closed his eyes, ignoring the core's sarcastic pop-up. Emotional overload detected. Recommend logical strategy instead. He didn't need logic. He focused on Arya, her tsundere scowls that hid loyalty, the way she'd stood by him when all others mocked, the warmth of her hand on his shoulder during their first heart-to-heart. I won't lose you, he whispered, and channeled every ounce of his care into his mana. It wasn't a spell or a summon. It was a surge of raw, bonding energy. Golden light erupted from Elias's chest, brighter than any magic he'd ever conjured. It shot across the chamber, wrapping around Arya like a second skin. The void tendril hissed and recoiled, its darkness dissolving under the warmth. Arya gasped as she fell, landing in a crouch, her hand immediately reaching for her sword. Master, you, she began, her voice uncharacteristically soft. No time for sentiment. Vega barked from the barricade. The core is vulnerable. Its void field is collapsing. Indeed, the corrupted core shuddered, its obsidian surface cracking with golden light. Astra raised her hands, summoning a barrage of star shards that pierced the cracks. Now, everyone, Elias commanded. Arya roared, unleashing a stream of dragon fire that mingled with Astra's starlight. Lyra fired a volley of arrows tipped with Seraphina's blessed energy, and even the fused slimes rolled forward as living bombs. Krona slowed time around the core, making its movements sluggish. The corrupted core let out a final, screeching wail. Data lost. It gurgled, before exploding in a shower of dark mist and glowing data streams. The dungeon fell silent, save for the heavy breathing of Elias's team. Victory. Corrupted core defeated. Absorbing energy. The core's voice announced, its usual sarcasm replaced by a tone of genuine surprise. Energy absorption complete. Core upgrade. Level 2 unlocked. New feature, pity system activated. After 9 failed n/or pulls, 10th pull guaranteed SSR. Additional mana capacity, plus 50%. Elias sank to his knees, exhaustion washing over him. The bonding burst had drained his last reserves. But a smile touched his lips. They'd done it. Arya approached, her armor scorched, but her eyes bright. She offered a hand. Don't get used to it, she muttered. But her grip was firm as she pulled him up. That was not entirely pathetic. Before Elias could reply, a cry cut through the relief. Master, Lyra. Seraphina's voice was frantic. They turned to see the archer collapsed against a wall, an arrow, not hers, protruding from her side. It was tipped with void residue, black tendrils snaking from the wound. Lyra's face was pale, her breathing shallow. I tried to shield Seraphina from a stray shot, she whispered, her usual confidence gone. Seraphina knelt beside her, her healing hands glowing with golden light. But as the light touched the wound, it sputtered and faded. The void corruption, it's resisting my magic, Seraphina said, tears in her celestial eyes. It's eating at her soul. I can't. I can't heal this. Elias rushed over, his heart clenching. Lyra had been with him from early on. Her clumsy shots turned precise through their bonding, her laughter during training sessions. Hang on, Lyra, he said, taking her hand. It was cold. Status, Lyra, R, critical. Soul integrity, 32% and falling. Void corruption detected. The core reported, its voice grim. The pity system, Vega suggested, her strategic mind already working. Master, you have enough mana for one pull now with the upgrade. Use it. Target a healer or something that can purge void energy. Elias nodded, desperation fueling him. He accessed the core's interface. Mana reserves, 62% after upgrade. Single pull available. Pity counter, 0 out of 9. Guaranteed SSR after 9 fails. Do it, he ordered. Pull now. The familiar gacha animation played in his mind. Orbs spinning, a rainbow of colors. But this time, there was no suspense. The orb glowed gold immediately. Congratulations. SSR summon. Flora, the Lifebinder. A woman appeared in a shower of petals and green light. She had emerald hair woven with vines, eyes like forest pools, and a dress of living leaves. I am Flora, she said, her voice a gentle rustle. I sense a life in peril. Without hesitation, Flora moved to Lyra's side. Her hands hovered over the wound, and vines sprouted from her fingertips, weaving into the corruption. This void, it is a blight, Flora murmured. But life can intertwine with even the darkest energies. She looked at Elias. Master, my power can merge with her, bind her soul to mine, transforming the corruption into new growth. But it requires your bond to anchor us both. Do you trust me? Elias didn't hesitate. Yes. Save her. He placed his hand over Flora's, feeling the warmth of her life energy. Then he looked at Lyra. You're not leaving us, Lyra. We need your arrows. Lyra managed a weak smile. Flora's vines glowed brighter, enveloping Lyra. The void corruption writhed, then began to transform. Black tendrils turned green, sprouting tiny flowers. Lyra's body shimmered, her form blending with Flora's in a cascade of light. When it faded, Lyra stood, but changed. Her skin had a faint, bark-like texture, her eyes held a leafy glint, and a bough made of woven thorns rested in her hand. Summon updated, Lyra/Flora hybrid SSR. Abilities, plant-based archery, soul-binding healing. Bonding level, instant sync due to emergency merge. I feel different, Lyra said, her voice stronger, tinged with Flora's softness. But alive. Thank you, Master. Elias let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He turned to thank each summon. Arya, who nodded curtly but stayed close. Seraphina, who wept with relief. Vega, already planning fortifications. Krona, monitoring temporal stability. Astra, her starlight calming. And now Lyra/Flora. But as he opened his mouth, the core's voice cut in, urgent. Warning, divine energy signature detected. Approaching rapidly. Entity identified, the Arbiter. Estimated arrival, 10 minutes. The Arbiter? Elias asked, his fatigue forgotten. A neutral god who judges dungeon cores. The core explained, its sarcasm returning faintly. Your gacha antics have drawn attention, Master. This is the trial I warned you about. Prepare, not for battle, but for judgment. Elias looked at his team, their faces set with determination. They'd survived corruption and loss. Now they faced a god. As they gathered in the dungeon heart, the air grew heavy with impending divinity. Seraphina's healing had stabilized them, but Lyra's close call lingered in the air. Her soul is fading. Master, we need a miracle summon, Seraphina had said. They'd gotten one, but at what cost? Elias squared his shoulders. Whatever came next, he'd face it with his bonds intact. The dungeon's heart chamber was thick with the acrid scent of void corruption and the metallic tang of spent mana. Elias knelt beside Lyra's still form, his hands trembling as they hovered over the archer's pale face. Seraphina's healing light, usually a warm golden glow, flickered weakly against the dark tendrils of energy that clung to Lyra's chest like parasitic vines. The corrupted core's final attack had left more than physical wounds. It had gnawed at her very essence. I can't stabilize her, Seraphina whispered, her angelic wings drooping with exhaustion. The void corruption resists celestial magic. It's consuming her soul. Arya stood guard nearby, her dragon-scale armor still smoldering from the battle. The Tsundere Knight's usual sharp demeanor had softened into grim concern. "There must be something we can do," she said, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. "She fought bravely. She doesn't deserve this." Krona, the time-manipulating sorceress, floated nearby, her hourglass-shaped staff pulsing with faint blue light. "I've slowed her temporal decay, but it's a temporary measure. Without intervention, she has perhaps an hour before her consciousness fades entirely." Elias's mind raced. The battle against the corrupted core had been costly. Lyra had taken the brunt of its void-spewing attack to protect him when his bonding link faltered. Guilt twisted in his gut like a physical pain. He had grown to care for these summons, not just as tools for defense, but as companions. Lyra, with her clumsy earnestness and growing accuracy, had become someone he relied on. "The pity system," he muttered, remembering the core's announcement after absorbing the corrupted core's energy. 9 failed pulls guarantees in SSR. "But we haven't done any pulls since the upgrade." The dungeon core's sarcastic voice echoed in the chamber, though its tone held an unusual edge of urgency. "Correct, Master. Your pity counter is at 0. But given the circumstances, I can initiate a targeted summon, focusing on life-binding or healing entities. Of course, there's no guarantee it'll be strong enough. Gacha is still Gacha, even with pity." Elias looked at Lyra's fading form, then at his other summons. Arya met his gaze, giving a slight nod. Seraphina clasped her hands in prayer. Krona simply watched, her expression unreadable but her presence supportive. "Do it," Elias said, his voice firming with resolve. "Target life-binding, whatever it takes." The core glowed brightly, its usual mocking announcements replaced by a more solemn tone. "Initiating targeted pity summon. Mana cost, high. Focusing parameters. Healing, life force restoration, soul binding. Pray to whatever gods you believe in, Master." Elias felt his mana drain rapidly, a familiar sensation by now, but no less exhausting. The chamber filled with swirling motes of green and gold light, coalescing into a single summoning orb that pulsed with vibrant energy. Unlike the flashy displays of previous summons, this one felt gentle, almost reverent. The orb split open, and from it stepped a woman who seemed woven from nature itself. Her hair flowed like willow branches, dotted with tiny glowing blossoms. Her skin had the texture of birch bark in places, smooth and pale, while her eyes shone like dew-kissed leaves. She wore robes of living ivy and carried a staff topped with a crystalline lotus. "I am Flora," she said, her voice a soft rustle like wine through a forest. "SSR Lifebinder. I sense a soul in peril." Without waiting for explanation, she moved to Lyra's side, kneeling gracefully. Her hands hovered over the void corruption, and where Seraphina's light had struggled, Flora's touch caused the dark tendrils to recoil. Green energy, rich with the scent of rain and soil, flowed from her palms. "The corruption has anchored deep," Flora murmured. "Standard healing would only tear her apart, but I can bind her life force to another source, merge her with something compatible." Elias's heart clenched. "Merge? What does that mean?" "She will become a hybrid entity," Flora explained, her gaze meeting his. "Part archer, part nature spirit. It will save her, but she will be changed. Her abilities will evolve. Her very nature will shift." Arya stepped forward. "Will she still be Lyra?" "At her core, yes," Flora said. "But like a sapling that grows into a tree, she will become more than she was. The process requires consent, from her fading consciousness, and from you, Master." Elias didn't hesitate. "Do it. Save her." Flora nodded, and her form began to shimmer. "Then I shall bind myself to her. Our essences will intertwine." The life binder dissolved into a cascade of green light that flowed into Lyra's chest. The void corruption shrieked silently as it was overwhelmed by burgeoning life energy. Vines sprouted from the stone floor around Lyra, curling protectively around her body. Flowers bloomed in an instant, their petals glowing with soft bioluminescence. Lyra's eyes flew open, but they were no longer purely human. One remained its familiar amber hue, while the other glowed emerald green, with tiny leaf-like patterns in the iris. She gasped, sitting up as the vines retreated. Her bow, previously plain wood, now had living ivy twined around its grip, and the arrows in her quiver had tips that resembled sharpened thorns. "Master," she whispered, her voice carrying a faint echo, like a breeze through branches. Elias rushed to her side, helping her stand. "Lyra, how do you feel?" She flexed her fingers, and a small blossom sprouted from her palm before dissolving into light. "Strange. Stronger. I can feel the dungeon's roots. And Flora, she's here with me. A presence in my mind, gentle and wise." Serafina examined her with renewed healing light. "The corruption is gone. Her life force is not just restored, it's flourishing." Arya let out a breath Elias hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Good. Now maybe you won't be so reckless next time." But there was relief in her tone, not criticism. Lyra, or perhaps Lyra Flora, smiled, a new serenity in her expression. "I can shoot arrows that sprout entangling vines upon impact. And my senses, I can detect life forces through walls. This is incredible." The core's voice returned, its sarcasm creeping back. "Congratulations, Master. You've successfully performed your first pity pull and created a hybrid SSR+. Now, if the emotional reunion is over, we have bigger problems." The Arbiter's approach signature just spiked. Estimated arrival, within the hour. Elias's relief evaporated. "The Divine Judge. What do we know about it?" The Arbiter is a neutral entity created by the Pantheon to oversee dungeon cores, especially anomalous ones like me, the core explained. "It doesn't care about your battles with rival cores or Academy raiders. It cares about balance. And your gacha mechanics, frankly, breaks several cosmic rules. The Arbiter will test your worth, not through combat, but through scenarios that probe your intentions, your morality, your bond with your summons." Krona floated closer. "I've encountered Arbiters in other timelines. They're inflexible but fair. If you fail their judgment, they'll dismantle your core and scatter your summons across realities." Arya's hand went to her sword. "We won't let that happen. Violence won't work against an Arbiter," Krona warned. "They exist beyond physical harm. This trial will be in your mind, Elias, and possibly in the hearts of your summons." Elias looked around the chamber, at Arya, steadfast and fierce, at Lyra, now reborn with nature's grace, at Serafina, compassionate and healing, at Krona, enigmatic and powerful. They had become more than defenders. They were his friends, his found family in this chaotic dungeon life. "Then we prepare," he said. "Not with weapons, but with understanding." "Core, what can we expect?" "The Arbiter typically creates simulated scenarios," the core said. "It might show you hypothetical choices, sacrifice a summon for greater power, abandon your dungeon to save yourself, trade your bonds for divine favor. Your responses will be judged. And Master, it will be watching your genuine reactions. No bluffing." Elias spent the next hour talking with each summon individually, not as a commander, but as someone who cared. With Arya, he revisited their first meeting, acknowledging how far they'd come from her initial disdain. "You've given me purpose again," she admitted, sheathing her sword. "Not just as a knight, but as someone who protects what matters." With Lyra Flora, he marveled at her new abilities, but more importantly, he ensured she felt accepted in her changed form. "I'm still me," she said, knocking an arrow that bloomed with rose petals along the shaft. "Just more." With Serafina, he discussed the celestial secrets she'd shared, and how her healing represented hope. "You mend more than wounds," he told her, and she smiled, her wings glowing softly. With Krona, he acknowledged the burden of her time manipulation, the weight of seeing doomed timelines. "You've given us second chances," he said, and she simply nodded, her hourglass staff turning slowly. As the hour neared its end, the dungeon's energy shifted. The air grew still, then charged with a pressure that felt neither hostile nor friendly, simply immense. A light began to form in the center of the chamber, pure and white, expanding until it resolved into a towering figure. The Arbiter stood nearly 10 feet tall, its form androgynous and clad in robes of shifting gray. Its face was smooth, featureless except for two eyes that held swirling galaxies within them. It carried no weapons, but its presence alone made the dungeon cores glow dim in comparison. "Elias," The Arbiter spoke, its voice resonating through the chamber without sound, vibrating in their very bones. Summoner of the Gacha Core, your existence defies fate's weave. Your methods disrupt cosmic balance. Elias stepped forward, his summons arrayed behind him. I'm just trying to survive, to protect what I care about. Intentions are irrelevant to balance, the Arbiter said. Only outcomes. You have bonded entities across realities, created hybrids, unlocked powers beyond your world's design. You must be judged. Stand for your trial. The Arbiter raised a hand, and the chamber dissolved into blinding light. When Elias's vision cleared, he stood in a featureless white space, alone. Before him floated 3 glowing orbs, each showing a different scene. In the first, he saw himself offering Arya to a rival core in exchange for unlimited SSR summons. In the second, he watched as he used Krona's time powers to undo Lyra's injury, but in doing so, erased her bond with Flora, leaving her ordinary and vulnerable. In the third, he saw the dungeon core destroyed, his summons freed, but himself stripped of all power, returning to the academy as a failure. The Arbiter's voice echoed. Choose one path. Demonstrate your worth through sacrifice or gain. Elias stared at the orbs, his heart pounding. This was the test. Would he prioritize power, sentiment, or safety? He thought of Arya's loyalty, of Lyra's new life, of the core's sarcastic guidance. He remembered the corrupted core's greed, how it sought to collect summons like trophies. I choose none of them, Elias said, his voice steady. I won't trade my friends for power. I won't undo their growth for my comfort. And I won't abandon this path we've built together. The Arbiter's featureless face seemed to regard him. Defiance is not a valid choice. Select an orb. Then my choice is to reject your false dilemmas, Elias insisted. My bond with them isn't about sacrifice or gain. It's about trust. It's about becoming stronger together. If that breaks your cosmic rules, then maybe your rules need changing. For a long moment, there was silence. Then the white space shimmered, and Elias found himself back in the dungeon chamber, the Arbiter still before him. But now, his summons were there too, looking at him with expressions of solidarity. The Arbiter's galactic eyes studied each of them in turn. Your bonds are genuine. Unusually so for a summoner. The Gacha Core was created as a test, and you have passed its initial trials not through luck alone, but through connection. This alters the judgment parameters. Elias held his breath. What does that mean? It means, the Arbiter said, its tone shifting slightly, almost curious, that you are not merely a disruptor. You are a potential harmonizer. But the true test approaches. A rogue god, one who abuses gacha mechanics to enslave worlds, has taken notice of your success. Your next trial will not be simulated. It will be mortal. The Arbiter raised a hand again, but this time, it offered not judgment, but a single crystal shard that floated toward Elias. A token of provisional approval. Use it to bolster your core when the time comes. But know this, the rogue god comes for your system. And he brings an army of stolen summons, ones bonded through force, not care. Prove your worth in that conflict, and greater patronage may follow. With a final flash of light, the Arbiter vanished, leaving the chamber in sudden quiet. The core was the first to speak, its sarcasm returning full force. Well, Master, you didn't get erased. And you got a shiny crystal. Now, about that rogue god's army. Scans show they'll be here within days. Might I suggest a few more summons? Maybe something with area of effect damage. Just a thought. Elias looked at the crystal in his hand, then at his summons. They had faced judgment and emerged united. But as the core's warning sank in, he realized the true battle was just beginning, and it would test their bonds like never before. The Arbiter stood before Elias in the heart of the dungeon, a being of pure light that seemed to both occupy space and transcend it. Its form shifted between humanoid and abstract geometric patterns, casting prismatic reflections across the stone walls where Elias's summons stood tense. Arya's hand rested on her sword hilt, her dragon-scale armor gleaming under the divine glow. Lyra, now Lyra Flora with vines woven through her hair and wooden patterns along her bow, stood beside Seraphina, whose angelic wings were partially unfurled. Krona hovered slightly off the ground, her hourglass-shaped staff pulsing with temporal energy, while Vega, the strategist, had already begun calculating escape routes in her mind. Elias felt the weight of the Arbiter's gaze like a physical pressure. This was no mere monster or academy bully. This was a god, or at least its envoy, and it held the power to erase everything he'd built. The core's voice echoed in his mind, unusually subdued. Master, this is it. The judgment. Don't screw up. Elias. The Arbiter spoke, its voice resonating not through air but directly into their souls. Your gacha core defies the natural order of summoning. Where others bind mindless beasts through force, you form bonds with sentient beings across realities. This is either a glorious innovation or a catastrophic perversion. I will test your worth. Before Elias could respond, the Arbiter raised a hand of light. The dungeon chamber dissolved around them, replaced by a series of shifting simulations. First, they stood in a war-torn battlefield where phantom armies clashed. The Arbiter's voice boomed. Scenario 1. Sacrifice Arya to unleash a wave of energy that would annihilate the enemy and grant you 3 guaranteed SSR summons. Her dragon heart contains enough power to fuel a dozen pulls. Elias watched as a spectral version of Arya appeared before him, bound in chains of light. She looked at him with those fierce red eyes he'd come to know so well. Eyes that had softened from disdain to reluctant trust over weeks of shared battles and late-night conversations about her fallen kingdom. In the simulation, the phantom Arya spoke, her voice strained. Master, if it saves the others. No, Elias said immediately, his voice firm despite the trembling in his hands. I don't care about guaranteed SSRs. I won't sacrifice any of them. Arya's real form beside him let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her fingers tightened around her sword. Idiot, she muttered, but there was warmth in the word. The simulation shifted. Now they stood in a celestial vault filled with glowing orbs, each representing a potential summon. The Arbiter's voice came again. Scenario 2. Trade Lyraflora's hybrid nature back to pure archer form. The separation would grant your core permanent doubled mana regeneration, allowing endless summons. She would lose her new plant-based abilities, but survive. Lyraflora stepped forward, her wooden bow creaking as she gripped it. Master, she began, her voice carrying both the archer's determination and Flora's gentle concern. Elias didn't let her finish. Her hybrid form isn't a mistake, it's who she is now. She fought beside us, nearly died for us. I won't undo that bond for mana. Lyraflora's vines glowed softly in response, tiny flowers blooming along their length. A third simulation formed, a dark laboratory where the core floated in a containment field. Final scenario, the Arbiter intoned. Surrender your core for study. In return, I will grant each of your summons immortality and freedom to return to their home worlds. You would lose your power but save them from future battles. This one gave Elias pause. He looked at his summons. Arya with her longing for redemption in a world that no longer existed. Lyraflora, who'd found purpose here. Seraphina, who'd left her celestial home. Krona from a doomed timeline. Vega, who thrived on strategy. The core's sarcastic commentary had become a constant in his mind. It's gacha mechanics, their survival. They're not prisoners, Elias said finally, meeting each of their eyes. They stay because they choose to. If anyone will leave. Don't be ridiculous. Arya cut in, her Tsundere mask slipping completely for once. Who'd protect you if I left? You'd trip over your own feet and die. My place is here, Seraphina added softly, her healing light pulsing. Krona simply smiled, her time manipulation field stabilizing. My timeline is gone, Master. This is my home now. Vega nodded sharply. Strategic assessment. Leaving would be suboptimal. We have work to do. Lyraflora knocked an arrow made of living wood. I stand with Master. Elias turned back to the Arbiter. They stay with me because we're a team. Not master and servants. Partners. So no, I won't surrender the core. We'll face whatever comes together. The simulations dissolved, returning them to the dungeon chamber. The Arbiter's form solidified slightly, its light becoming less blinding. Interesting, it said, and for the first time, there was something like approval in its tone. Most summoners see their creations as tools. You see them as people. The fallen god who created your core sought to test whether humanity could wield such power with compassion rather than greed. You have passed. Relief washed through Elias, but it was short-lived. However, the Arbiter continued, your success has drawn dangerous attention. There is a rogue god, one who calls himself the Gacha King, who abuses similar mechanics to enslave entire worlds. He captures powerful summons, breaks their wills, and uses them to conquer realities. He has sensed your core's unique signature and will come for it. Elias' sword was fully drawn now. Let him try. I offer a deal, the Arbiter said. Assist me in stopping the Gacha King. In return, you will gain my divine patronage. Your core's summoning rates will increase by 15% across all rarities. You will receive early warnings of divine-level threats. And when the time comes, I will stand with you against the rogue god. Elias exchanged looks with his summons. Vega gave a subtle nod, the strategist recognizing the tactical advantage. Seraphina's healing light brightened in agreement. Krona's hourglass spun faster, as if already calculating temporal strategies. We accept, Elias said. But what do we need to do first? First, the Arbiter replied, its light beginning to fade. You must survive the more immediate threat. The Academy has not forgotten you. Your former tormentor returns with reinforcements, and something stolen from my kind. Prepare, Elias. Your bonds will be tested in fire. With a final flash, the Arbiter vanished, leaving behind only a faint divine scent of ozone and starlight. The core's voice returned to its usual sarcastic tone. Asterisk. Well, that was dramatic. Divine patronage, huh? About time we got some decent rates around here. Current SSR probability, a whopping 2%. Rejoice. Asterisk. Quiet, Elias said, but he was smiling. Then he turned serious. Vega, status report. The strategist summoned a holographic map of the dungeon and surrounding areas. Scouts report movement at the Academy gates. Kale has returned with what appears to be 3 full raid teams, approximately 60 combatants. More concerning, they're carrying a divine artifact that matches the Arbiter's description. Energy signatures suggest it's designed to disrupt magical bonds at a fundamental level. Arya slammed her fist against the wall, leaving a dent in the stone. That coward. He runs when beaten, then comes back with stolen power. He's always been like that, Elias said quietly, remembering years of humiliation. But this time we're ready. Over the next hours, they prepared. Vega coordinated defenses. Fused slimes were positioned as living traps in the entrance tunnels, their gelatinous bodies rigged to explode on contact. Lyra Flora and her archer squad took positions in the upper galleries, their plant-enhanced arrows capable of entangling targets. Seraphina prepared healing stations in the inner chambers, while Krona set up temporal distortion fields at key choke points. Elias stood with Arya in the main hall, where they'd first fought Kale's team. The Dragon Knight was unusually quiet. What's wrong? Elias asked. Arya didn't look at him. That simulation, where you were offered my sacrifice. You didn't even hesitate. Of course not. I know that, she said, finally meeting his eyes. But hearing it, she shook her head. Never mind. Just don't get yourself killed today, Master. It would be inconvenient. Elias reached out, placing a hand on her armored shoulder. We protect each other. That's the deal. Before she could respond, likely with some Tsundere retort, alarms blared through their mental link. Vega's voice came sharp and clear. Asterisk, they're here. Main entrance. The artifact is active. I'm reading bond disruption waves already. Krona's temporal fields are slowing the effect, but we have limited time. Asterisk. They rushed to their positions. Through the core's surveillance system, Elias saw Kale standing at the dungeon entrance, flanked by dozens of Academy elites. The bully had changed. Gone was the arrogant student, replaced by someone harder, angrier. In his hands, he held a crystalline orb that pulsed with stolen divine energy. Elias, Kale's voice boomed through amplification magic. Come out and surrender your core. Last time, you got lucky with that time witch. This time, he raised the artifact. This time I have the Godbreaker orb. It shatters magical bonds permanently. Your precious waifus will become mindless dolls for me to collect. Rage burned in Elias's chest, but he kept his voice calm through their mental link. All units, hold positions. Let them come to us. Kale's forces advanced, the artifact creating a shimmering field around them that made Elias's connection to his summons feel thin, stretched. Like trying to hold water in a sieve. The first wave hit the slime traps, Explosions of acidic gel took down several frontline fighters, but Kale's mages countered with fire spells. The battle proper began in the entrance tunnel, where Arya met their vanguard, her dragon fire clashing against shield walls. Elias watched from his command position, the core's interface showing bond integrity percentages. Ares was at 85% and dropping. Lyra Flores at 78%. The artifact was working faster than they'd anticipated. Krona, can you boost the temporal fields? Elias asked. The sorceress's voice came strained. Asterisk, trying. Master, but the artifact has its own temporal stabilization. It's resistant to my magic. Asterisk. Kale pushed forward, personally cutting down fused slimes with a blade that glowed with the same stolen divine energy as the orb. Where are you, failure? Hiding while your monsters die for you? Just like always, too weak to fight your own battles. Elias's hands clenched. The old taunts still stung, but now they fueled determination rather than despair. He reached out through the thinning bonds, not with commands, but with reassurance. To Arya, asterisk, I'm here. We're together. Asterisk to Lyra Flora, asterisk, your arrows fly true. Asterisk to all of them. Asterisk, trust in each other. Asterisk. Something shifted. The bond percentages stabilized, then began creeping back up. 86%, 87%. The artifact's disruption met the resistance of genuine connection. Kale noticed. His eyes widened as Arya's dragon fire burned brighter, cutting through his front line. Impossible. The Godbreaker should have broken them by now. Some bonds, Elias said, stepping from his concealed position into view, can't be broken by stolen power. For a moment, the two former classmates faced each other across the battlefield. Then Kale's expression twisted into fury. Fine. If the orb won't break them, I'll just take them from your corpse. He raised the Godbreaker orb high, chanting activation words that shouldn't have been known to mortals. The crystal blazed with terrible light, and this time, the bond disruption wasn't a wave, it was a tsunami. Elias gasped as his connections to his summons stretched to breaking point. Arya cried out, falling to one knee. Lyra Flora's arrows missed their marks. Seraphina's healing light flickered. Kale laughed, advancing with his remaining forces. This time, I'll shatter your core and take your waifus for myself. The artifact's energy built toward a catastrophic release. Elias looked at his summons, his friends, fighting through the pain to protect him. He looked at the core in his mind, its sarcastic interface now showing emergency alerts. And he made a decision. Core, he said silently. Emergency summon. Everything we've got. Asterisk, Master, your mana reserves are at 40% from maintaining bonds against the disruption. An emergency pull now could. Asterisk. Do it. The core didn't argue. In the air before Elias, a summoning portal ripped open, glowing with desperate energy. Kale paused, his artifact's chant faltering for a crucial second. From the portal, a single orb emerged, not the 10 of a normal roll, but one massive, pulsing sphere that glowed with colors beyond the normal spectrum. It hovered between them, and the very air seemed to hold its breath. Then the orb cracked open, and something stepped out. The orb cracked with a sound like shattering glass, golden light bleeding through fissures that spiderwebbed across its surface. Elias stood panting in the dungeon heart chamber, the Godbreaker orb's violet energy still pulsing from Kale's raised hands across the cavern. Around him, his summons staggered. Arya's dragon-scale armor flickered, Lyra's bow arm trembled, Seraphina's healing aura sputtered like a dying candle. What did you pull, failure? Kale's voice echoed, smug beneath his academy commander's helmet. Another useless N-rank to add to your collection? Elias didn't answer. His mind was a whirlwind. The Arbiter's warning about the rogue god, the strain in his bonds like frayed threads, and now this emergency summon, fueled by the last dregs of his mana. The core's sarcastic voice whispered in his mind. Asterisk. Congratulations. You've activated the desperation roll feature. Odds of UR rank. 0.01%. Pray harder, Master. Asterisk. The orb exploded. Not with light, but with silence. A vacuum of sound that swallowed Kale's mocking laughter. From the fragments emerged a figure so massive it had to crouch in the 30-foot-high chamber. Stone-gray skin etched with glowing runes, for arms each holding a different weapon, sword, hammer, shield, and a crystalline orb that swirled with storm clouds. 2 eyes burned like forged fires beneath a helm of black iron. "You are rank Titan. Kronos, the mountain that walks," the core announced, its usual sarcasm replaced by something akin to awe. Asterisk statistical probability, impossible. Bonding requirement, shared resolve in the face of annihilation. Well, you've got that in spades. Asterisk. Kronos turned its head, the movement grinding like continental plates shifting. Its voice was the rumble of an earthquake. "Who calls me from the deep stone?" Elias stepped forward, ignoring the tremble in his legs. "I do. Elias, Dungeon Master. We're fighting for our lives and our bonds." He gestured to his summons, who were rallying at the Titan's presence. Arya straightened, her Tsundere pride flashing in her eyes as she glared at Kale. Lyra nocked an arrow, its tip glowing with Flora's intertwined plant energy. Seraphina's wings spread, casting a soft light that soothed their strained connections. Kronos studied them for a heartbeat that felt like an eternity. Then it nodded. "I sense no deceit. Only loyalty forged in fire. My arms are yours." Across the chamber, Kale snarled. "A Titan? Fine. The Godbreaker orb will shatter it like the rest." He raised the artifact, a jagged violet crystal that pulsed with malevolent energy. Around him, 50 Academy elites and a dozen artifact-enhanced monsters, twisted golems with crackling energy claws, advanced. The dungeon heart chamber, a vast circular space with mana crystal formations jutting from walls and floor, became a battlefield. Vega, the SSR strategist, materialized from shadows near Elias. Her silver hair was tied back, tactical lenses glowing over her eyes. "Master, analysis. The orb targets magical bonds. Kronos' innate resistance may buy us time, but we need to destroy it. Krona, can you manipulate its temporal field?" Krona, the time sorceress, floated beside them, her hourglass pendant spinning. "The orb exists in a stabilized time pocket. I can destabilize it, but it requires precision. Arya, Lyra, you'll need to create an opening." Arya hefted her greatsword, dragon fire wreathing the blade. "Just point me at the pretty crystal." Lyra nodded, her hybrid plant arrows already growing thorns. "Flora says she can root the enhanced monsters. Seraphina, keep our bonds steady." The angel healer glowed brighter. "The Titan's presence is reinforcing them. But hurry, the orb's pressure is increasing." Elias felt it, a cold pressure in his chest, like ice spreading through his veins. His mental links to his summons wavered, images flickering. Arya's memory of their first fight, Lyra's laughter during training, Seraphina's gentle hymns. He clenched his fists. Asterisk no. I won't lose them, asterisk. "Vega, give me a plan," he said, his voice steadying. Phase 1. Kronos engages the front line. Its mass will draw fire. Phase 2. Arya and Lyra flank left, targeting the orb's mage guards. Phase 3. Krona and I strike the orb during the distraction. You, Master, must bond with Kronos fully. Its power is raw, untamed. Your resolve will anchor it. Kronos rumbled agreement, hefting its hammer. "I am ready." Kill didn't wait. "Attack. Shatter the bonds." The enhanced golems charged, claws tearing grooves in the stone floor. Academy mages chanted, bolts of dispelling energy arcing toward Elias's party. Kronos moved. It was like watching a mountain decide to dance, slow, inevitable, devastating. The Titan's hammer came down on the lead golem, crushing it into sparking rubble. Its sword swept in a wide arc, cleaving through 2 more. The shield deflected mage bolts, absorbing them with rune flashes. The crystalline orb in its 4th hand crackled, and a localized storm erupted among Kale's backline, lightning striking down 3 mages. "Now!" Vega shouted. Arya shot forward, a blur of scales and fire. Her dragon fire breath incinerated a group of archers guarding Kale's left flank. Lyra's arrows flew, each one sprouting vines that entangled the enhanced monsters, their claws snagging in sudden foliage. Flora's voice whispered through the bond, asterisk, "They're rooted, Master. But not for long." Asterisk. Elias focused on Kronos. He reached out with his mind, not through the core's interface, but through the raw emotion of the moment, the desperation to protect, the refusal to sacrifice. He remembered the Arbiter's test, asterisk, Would you trade Arya for unlimited power? His answer had been a furious no. That same fury burned now. Kronos, he thought. We fight for each other. Not as master and servant, but as allies. The Titan paused mid-swing. Its forge-fire eyes met Elias's. A wave of understanding passed between them. Ancient, patient strength meeting youthful, stubborn resolve. The bond snapped into place, solid as bedrock. Kronos's runes blazed brighter, its movements becoming fluid, coordinated. It wasn't just a summoned monster anymore. It was part of the team. Bond established. The core murmured, almost softly. UR rank synchronization, 100%. Would you look at that? The underdog actually did it. Across the chamber, Kale screamed in rage. The orb. Focus it on the Titan. He raised the Godbreaker crystal, its violet light intensifying. A beam lanced out, striking Kronos' chest. The Titan roared, a sound of stone cracking. Its runes flickered, and Elias felt a searing pain in his own bond, like a chain yanked taut. But Kronos didn't fall. It planted its feet, shield raised, and the beam splintered against it. My will is stone, it growled. Your artifact cannot break what is forged in loyalty. Krona chose that moment. Her hourglass reversed, and time around the orb stuttered. The violet beam fractured into disjointed segments, like a broken film reel. Vega darted in, daggers gleaming with mana disruption enchantments. She struck the orb's base, not to shatter it, but to wedge her blades into its temporal field. It's destabilizing, she called. One more push. Arya was already there. She leaped, greatsword overhead, and brought it down on the orb with all her dragon-enhanced strength. Lyra's arrow struck the same instant, Flora's thorns burrowing into cracks. The Godbreaker crystal shuddered, violet light flashing erratically. Kale's eyes widened in panic. No, this artifact is divine. It can't. It could. The orb exploded in a silent burst of void energy, consuming itself. The backlash threw Kale and his nearest soldiers across the chamber, slamming them into crystal formations. The enhanced monsters, deprived of the orb's power, crumbled into inert rock. The Academy elites faltered, their dispelling magic fading. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of dying energy and Kronos' heavy breathing. Elias staggered, the sudden release of pressure leaving him lightheaded. His bonds surged back, stronger than ever. Arya's fierce protectiveness, Lyra's relieved joy, Seraphina's soothing warmth, Krona's calm certainty, Vega's sharp satisfaction, and now Kronos' steadfast presence, a mountain at his back. He walked toward Kale, who was struggling to rise, his armor dented. The bully's face was pale, blood trickling from his lip. You destroyed a divine artifact, he whispered, disbelief warring with fear. I protected my family, Elias said, his voice quiet but carrying across the chamber. Leave. Tell the Academy I'm not a failure anymore. And if they send another raid, they'll face more than a Titan. Kale stared at him, then at the assembled summons, the Dragon Knight, the Hybrid Archer, the Angel, the Time Sorceress, the Strategist, and the UR-rank Titan, all standing united. Defeat settled in his eyes. He nodded, shakily signaling retreat. The remaining Academy soldiers helped him up, and they limped from the dungeon heart, leaving behind the wreckage of their ambition. As they disappeared into the tunnels, Elias let out a long breath. Seraphina immediately moved to heal minor wounds, a burn on Arya's arm, a cut on Lyra's cheek. Kronos stabilized the chamber's time flow, repairing minor fractures. Vega began assessing damage, while Kronos stood guard, its presence a comforting weight. Arya sheathed her sword and walked over to Elias. Her tsundere demeanor was softened by a rare, genuine smile. Not bad, master. For a former failure. He smiled back. Couldn't have done it without you. Any of you. Lyra hugged him briefly, her plant vines gently brushing his shoulder. We're a team. The core's voice cut through the moment, its sarcasm returning full force. Well, that was dramatic. Bonding levels increased across the board. Kronos has been added to your permanent roster. But hey, don't get too cozy. Elias frowned. What now? The core's interface flashed red in his mind. A map of the dungeon appeared, then zoomed out to show the surrounding region. Dozens of signals pulsed, rival cores. Yes, but beyond them, something vast and hungry. A portal signature, flickering into existence miles above, tearing through reality. The rogue god. The core said, all humor gone. Asterisk, the Gacha King. He's located us. Scans show an army pouring through, stolen SSR summons, hundreds of them, all bound by force. ETA, less than an hour. Asterisk. Elias's blood ran cold. He looked at his summons, their faces hardening with determination. They'd won a battle, but the war was just beginning. Kronos hefted its hammer, runes glowing. Then we prepare. Arya drew her sword again. Let him come. We'll show him what real bonds can do. But Elias felt the scale of it, a god, with an army of powerful summons, against his small, bonded party. The dungeon heart chamber, once a refuge, now felt like a target. The core's final whisper was almost gentle. Asterisk, the ultimate gacha master. Pull for victory, or lose everything. He's coming, and he's bringing your worst nightmare. An army of waifus who hate their master. Asterisk. Outside, the sky darkened, not with clouds, but with the shimmer of a forming portal. The air grew heavy with oppressive mana. Elias straightened, meeting each of his summons' eyes. They nodded back, unwavering. Then we roll the dice, he said, and turned to face the coming storm. The silence that followed Kale's retreat was deafening. Elias stood in the heart of his dungeon, surrounded by the panting forms of his bonded summons. The air still crackled with residual magic from the destroyed Godbreaker orb, and the stone floor was scarred with burns and cracks from the fierce battle. Arya leaned on her greatsword, her dragon-scale armor gleaming under the dungeon's ambient light. Lyra, now merged with Flora into a graceful hybrid with vines woven through her hair, knelt beside Seraphina, who was channeling gentle healing energy into Krona's exhausted form. Vega, the strategist, was already scanning the chamber with analytical eyes, while Kronos, the UR-rank titan, stood like a mountain of living stone at the chamber's entrance. Elias wiped sweat from his brow, his heart pounding not just from exertion, but from the sudden quiet. For a moment, he allowed himself to believe it was over. The Academy raid had been repelled, Kale was defeated, and his bonds with his summons felt stronger than ever. He could feel their emotions through the mental link. Arya's fierce pride, Lyra/Flora's quiet determination, Seraphina's compassionate warmth, Krona's weary resolve, Vega's calculating focus, and Kronos' ancient, steady presence. Then the core's voice shattered the illusion. Alert! Alert! It chimed in its signature sarcastic tone, though the usual mockery was edged with genuine urgency. Massive spatial anomaly detected. The Gacha King has triangulated our position. Incoming portal in T-30 seconds. And no, this isn't a drill, Master. Unless you consider an interdimensional invasion a drill, which would be a very bad drill. Elias's blood ran cold. He looked up, following the core's mental projection. Above the chamber's central dais, where the glowing orb of the dungeon core pulsed with soft light, the air began to warp. Colors bled together, purples, blacks, and sickly greens, as reality itself seemed to tear. A low hum vibrated through the stone, growing louder until it felt like the dungeon was groaning in protest. What's happening? Arya demanded, hefting her sword. Her eyes narrowed, the draconic slits within them contracting. That energy, it feels wrong. It's the rogue god, Kronos said, her voice strained. She pushed herself up, time manipulation runes flickering around her fingers. I've seen echoes of his work across timelines. He doesn't just use gacha mechanics, he perverts them, steals summons from other cores, breaks their bonds, and enslaves them. Lyra/Flora stood, her bow of intertwined wood and thorn materializing in her hands. He's coming for us, she said softly, vines creeping up her arms in a defensive gesture. Elias's mind raced. The core's warnings from earlier chapters flashed back. The fallen god who created it, the divine attention his success had drawn. This was the culmination of it all, not just a battle for survival, but for the very nature of the power he wielded. He took a deep breath, forcing down the panic that threatened to rise. He was no longer the failed summoner mocked at the Academy. He was the master of a legendary party, bonded through trust and care. Core, he said aloud, his voice steadying. You mentioned an upgrade. Finalize it. Now. Oh right. The post-victory power-up, the core chirped, its orb glowing brighter. Since you passed the Arbiter's test and defeated a divine artifact-wielding bully, I've unlocked the multiversal summoning protocol. Basically, you can now call upon allies from across all the realities you've bonded with. Think of it as your personal army on speed dial. But fair warning, it drains mana like a black hole devours stars. Use it wisely, or you'll be a dried-up husk before you can say SSR. A flood of information poured into Elias's mind. New interfaces, connection points to distant worlds, a network of potential allies tied to the bonds he'd forged. He saw glimpses of them. Dragon riders from Aria's home realm, celestial beings from Seraphina's heaven, time-lost warriors from Krona's fractured timelines, even ancient nature spirits linked to Flora. It was overwhelming, but he clung to the certainty of it. This was their chance. Above, the portal solidified. It was a gaping maw of swirling energy, large enough to swallow the entire chamber. Through it, Elias could see glimpses of another realm. A desolate landscape of floating islands and shattered monuments, under a sky stained with unnatural hues. And emerging from the portal, descending like a rain of cursed stars, were figures. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Stolen SSR summons. They landed with heavy thuds and graceful touches, filling the chamber and spilling out into the corridors beyond. Elias's breath caught. There were knights in obsidian armor with eyes glowing with forced obedience, mages wrapped in chains of light, beasts with collars of crackling energy, and archers whose arrows hummed with suppressed will. Each one radiated immense power, but their auras felt hollow, twisted, the bonds that should have given them life replaced by the Gacha King's domination. At their forefront, hovering just before the portal, was a figure that made the air itself seem to recoil. The Gacha King. He was tall and clad in robes that shifted through every rarity color. Common gray, rare blue, epic purple, legendary gold, as if mocking the system he abused. His face was obscured by a mask of shifting faces, each one a stolen summon's visage frozen in agony. In one hand, he held a staff topped with a spinning gacha ball that glowed with malevolent light. So, the Gacha King's voice echoed, smooth and dripping with false benevolence. The little summoner who caught the Arbiter's eye. I must say, I'm impressed. To bond so deeply with mere pulls, it's almost quaint. But now it's time to graduate. Hand over the core, and I might let you live as a servant. Your summons will join my collection. They'll be happier, really. No more messy emotions to weigh them down. Elias felt a surge of anger, hot and pure. He stepped forward, placing himself between the Gacha King and his bonded party. Around him, his summons tensed, ready to fight. He could feel their resolve through the link. No fear, only determination to protect what they'd built together. You don't understand anything, Elias said, his voice ringing clear in the tense silence. These aren't just pulls. They're my friends, my family, and we're not handing over anything. He turned to face his party, meeting each of their eyes. Arya gave a sharp nod, her grip tightening on her sword. Lyra/Flora knocked an arrow, thorns bristling along its shaft. Seraphina spread her wings, healing light gathering in her palms. Krona's runes blazed to life, slowing time in a bubble around them. Vega adjusted his glasses, tactical data flashing in his gaze. Kronos let out a low rumble, the ground trembling beneath his feet. Elias raised his voice, pouring all his conviction into it. We've faced mockery, raids, rival cores, and divine tests. We've fought not just for survival, but for the bonds that make us strong. This isn't just another battle. It's a war for every summon enslaved by that monster. For every bond twisted into a chain. We're not just defending this dungeon anymore. We're taking the fight to him. He extended his hands, tapping into the core's new upgrade. Mana surged from him, a torrent that connected to the multiversal network. Core. Initiate multiversal summoning. Bring our allies. You got it, Master. The core announced, its orb blazing like a miniature sun, calling all bonded realities. This is your captain speaking. We're going to war. Hope you packed your best gear, because the Gacha King's about to learn what a real gacha looks like. Portals, smaller but bright with hopeful energy, began to tear open around the chamber. From them stepped the allies Elias had glimpsed, a squadron of dragon riders on winged beasts, their scales shimmering like Arias, celestial warriors with Seraphina's grace, bearing lances of light, time walkers from Krona's realms, flickering in and out of phase, and nature avatars from Flora's world, woven from living wood and bloom. They weren't as numerous as the Gacha King's stolen army, but they shone with the authenticity of true bonds, their eyes clear and determined. The Gacha King laughed, a sound like breaking glass. A touching speech. And you even brought friends. How adorable. But numbers alone won't save you. My summons are perfected, stripped of the weaknesses of loyalty. He raised his staff. Attack. Crush them and bring me that core. The stolen army surged forward, a wave of enslaved power. Elias didn't hesitate. For our bonds, he shouted and charged. The chamber erupted into chaos. Arya met a stolen dragon knight in a clash of steel and fire, her movements fueled by her bond with Elias. Lyra/Flora's arrows flew, each one guided by her hybrid nature to seek weak points in the enemy's formations. Seraphina wove through the fray, her healing light mending wounds and bolstering allies. Krona manipulated time, creating pockets where their strikes landed faster and the enemies slowed. Vega directed the multiversal allies with precise commands, turning the battle into a coordinated dance. Kronos waded into the thickest fighting, his titanic fists shattering armor and shaking the ground. Elias fought not with a weapon, but with the core's interface. He channeled mana, strengthening bonds mid-battle, feeling each summon's power grow as he reinforced their connections. He dodged a blast from a stolen mage, rolling behind Kronos for cover. The core's voice kept up a running commentary in his mind. Ooh, nice dodge. Mana efficiency at 65%. Bond level spiking. Arya's loyalty is off the charts. Someone's been a good master. But watch out for that guy with the shiny collar. He's packing an SSR-grade curse. Despite their valor, the Gacha King's army was vast. Elias saw a celestial ally fall, a time walker flicker out of existence, a nature avatar wither under dark magic. His mana was draining fast, the multiversal summoning taking its toll. He gritted his teeth. They couldn't win here, not in a war of attrition in their own dungeon. Core, he thought desperately. We need to end this. How do we reach him? The portal, the core replied, its tone uncharacteristically serious. It's his lifeline to this realm. If we charge through, we can take the fight to his domain. But it's a one-way trip until we beat him. The ultimate gacha, master, pull for victory or lose everything. Elias didn't need to think twice. He reached out through the bond, conveying his plan to his party. They understood instantly, a shared resolve that transcended words. Gathering his remaining mana, he focused on the portal above, now shimmering with the Gacha King's smug presence. Everyone, Elias yelled, his voice cutting through the din to me. We're not just defending, we're invading. His summons rallied, fighting their way to his side. The multiversal allies covered their retreat, holding back the stolen army. Together, Elias and his bonded party, Arya, Lyra/Flora, Seraphina, Krona, Vega, and Kronos, formed a spearhead. With a final surge of mana, Elias activated the core's last reserve, creating a protective bubble around them. Now he commanded. They charged upward, a streak of light and determination, straight into the heart of the Gacha King's portal. The rogue god's eyes widened behind his mask. He hadn't expected this. As they crossed the threshold, reality twisted, the dungeon chamber vanishing behind them. Elias found himself standing on a floating island in the desolate realm he'd glimpsed, his party beside him, the portal's ceiling shut behind them. Before them, the Gacha King hovered, his stolen army left behind, his expression now one of furious surprise. They were in his domain, outnumbered no longer, but facing the source of the corruption itself. The core's voice echoed in the eerie silence, its sarcasm laced with a hint of pride. Good luck, master. This is the ultimate gacha. Pull for victory or lose everything. Elias met the Gacha King's gaze, his bonds thrumming with power. He raised a hand, mana gathering for the first strike in this god's realm. The war for the multiverse had just begun.